In a New York City brownstone worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes, a woman who built an empire from code sites trapped in a body that no longer obeys her commands. She's burned through 117 assistants in 18 months. Across town, a man who once had everything now counts coins for his daughter's next meal. Today, their worlds collide in an interview that will change both their lives forever. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Now let me tell you about the day Ethan Cross walked through Vera Lang's door with nothing left to lose. The November rain hammered against the brownstone's tall windows like it had a personal grudge against glass. Ethan Cross stood on the top step of the Gramercy Park address, his only interview suit damp at the shoulders, his resume protected inside a plastic grocery bag because he couldn't afford a proper portfolio case anymore. His phone showed 6:58 a.m. He was early. He was always early these days. Desperation had turned him into the kind of punctual that bordered on pathetic. Through the ornate door's side window, he could see warm light spilling across marble floors that probably cost more than his entire year's rent. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, 34 years old, lean in the wrong way, with circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep could fix because sleep was a luxury when you were 2 weeks from eviction. He thought about Lily, still asleep in their studio apartment 12 blocks away, curled up under the winter coat he'd laid over her blanket because the heat had been spotty all week. She'd drawn him a picture yesterday, a stick figure, Dad holding a stick figure daughter's hand, both of them smiling under a crayon sun. She'd written "Good luck, Daddy" in letters that wandered across the page like a drunk driver. That picture was in his wallet now, pressed against the $17 that stood between them and complete destitution. Ethan pressed the doorbell. The chime that echoed inside sounded expensive, the kind of sound that said, "We have money, and we know it." Footsteps approached, measured, unhurried. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back with geometric precision, wearing what Ethan's mother would have called sensible elegance, a charcoal dress that probably cost a month of his old salary. "Mr. Cross?" Her voice carried the flat assessment of someone who'd seen 1,000 hopefuls and wasn't impressed by one more. "Yes, ma'am. I have a 7 o'clock appointment with Miss Lang." The woman's eyes traveled from his damp shoulders to his scuffed shoes, not with contempt, but with the clinical evaluation of someone calculating odds. "I'm Margaret Chen, house manager. You're the 18th interview this month." She stepped aside, gesturing him in. "Take off your shoes, please. Ms. Lang has allergies to whatever people track in from outside." Ethan bent to remove his shoes, grateful he'd worn socks without holes. The marble floor was cold even through the fabric. Margaret led him past a staircase that curved upward like something from a museum, past walls hung with abstract art that probably had names and prices he couldn't pronounce, into a study that smelled of leather and old books and something medical he couldn't quite identify. "Wait here," Margaret said. "Don't touch anything. Don't sit unless invited. Miss Lang will be down shortly." She paused at the doorway, and something in her expression shifted, not quite sympathy, but close enough to be unsettling. "Mr. Cross, I'm going to give you advice I don't give most candidates. If she asks you a question, tell the truth. Not the truth you think she wants to hear, the actual truth. She can smell bullshit from 3 rooms away, and she doesn't give second chances." Then Margaret was gone, and Ethan was alone in a room that felt like it cost more than his entire life. He didn't sit. He stood with his plastic-wrapped resume clutched in both hands, taking in the study with the quick assessment of someone who'd once known how to read a room for what it said about power. The desk was massive, dark wood, maybe mahogany, arranged with surgical precision. No clutter, no personal photos. Just a state-of-the-art computer setup with 3 monitors, a modified keyboard with oversized keys, and a trackball mouse mounted on an adjustable arm. The bookshelves told a different story, technical manuals mixed with philosophy, programming languages nestled against poetry, Marcus Aurelius next to a textbook on neural interfaces. This wasn't the collection of someone who decorated for show. This was the library of someone who actually read, who actually thought, who'd built their fortune on something other than inheritance or luck. A motor sound hummed from the hallway, growing closer. Ethan turned toward the door. The wheelchair appeared first. Top of the line, he recognized the model from the research he'd done last night on the public library computer. Customized controls on the armrest, responsive enough to navigate with minimal movement. Then came the woman in the chair, and Ethan felt something he hadn't expected. Recognition of a kindred spirit, someone else who'd learned to carry weight they never asked for. Vera Lang was 41, according to his research, though she could have passed for younger if not for the particular weariness that lived in her eyes, the kind that came from pain managed but never defeated. Her dark hair was cut short, practical, shot through with gray she clearly didn't bother to hide. She wore black pants and a crisp white shirt, no jewelry, no makeup, nothing that suggested she gave a damn what anyone thought of her appearance. But it was her eyes that locked onto Ethan's and held them, sharp, dark, absolutely uncompromising. Eyes that had built a tech company from nothing, that had coded her first $1 million algorithm in a graduate school dorm room, that had testified before Congress about digital privacy rights. Eyes that had watched 117 assistants come and go, each one failing some test she never bothered to explain. The wheelchair stopped 6 feet from where he stood. Vera didn't extend a hand. She couldn't, he realized, noticing how her arms rested motionless on the chair's armrests. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like source code being debugged. "Ethan Cross," she said. Her voice was surprisingly warm, a contrast to the ice in her gaze. "You're early. That's either strategic punctuality or you have nowhere better to be." "Both," Ethan said, because Margaret had told him to tell the truth. The corner of Vera's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough. "At least you're honest. Sit down. You're hovering like you're about to bolt, and it's irritating." Ethan sat in the leather chair across from where her wheelchair had positioned itself. He set his plastic-wrapped resume on his lap and waited, because he'd learned in his previous life that in negotiation, whoever spoke first usually lost. Vera let the silence stretch. She was testing him already, he realized, seeing if he'd fidget, if he'd fill the quiet with nervous chatter, if he'd try to sell himself before she asked him to. He kept his mouth shut and his eyes steady, meeting her gaze with the kind of calm that came from having nothing left to lose. Finally, Vera spoke. "I don't care about your resume. I had someone run a background check on you before I agreed to this interview. Columbia MBA, graduated top of your class, 7 years at Blackstone, rising star, on track for partner." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Then your wife died and you fell apart." The words hit like a physical blow, but Ethan kept his face neutral. He'd learned to take this punch without showing the damage. Vera continued, relentless. "Medical debt from Emily's cancer treatment, $437,000. You liquidated everything. Cashed out the 401k, sold the apartment, burned through savings. You took a leave of absence that became permanent because you couldn't put your daughter in daycare and work 80-hour weeks. Now you're living in a studio in Washington Heights, 3 months behind on rent, taking whatever freelance work you can get while your daughter's in school." She leaned forward slightly, and even that small movement seemed calculated to add weight to her next words. "You're not here because you want this job. You're here because you're desperate. So let me ask you the only question that matters. Why shouldn't I hire someone who actually wants to work for me instead of someone who's just running from catastrophe?" Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. He'd been through 17 other interviews in the past 6 weeks. He'd worn his best smile, delivered his best pitch, pretended he was anything other than a man barely keeping his head above water. He'd told hiring managers about his passion for administrative excellence, his enthusiasm for supporting visionary leadership, all the polished bullshit that was supposed to get you hired. Every one of them had turned him down. He looked at Vera Lang, at this woman who'd built an empire and lost her body, who sat in a chair worth $60,000 because her spine didn't work anymore, who was asking him to justify his desperation like it was a character flaw instead of a fact. And he told her the truth. "Because desperate people don't quit," Ethan said. His voice was steady, stripped of pretense. "You've gone through 117 assistants. I read about you before I came here. Everything public, anyway. They say you're impossible, demanding, that you fire people for being 3 minutes late, for using the wrong folder system, for breathing wrong in meetings. They say working for you is like being in a war zone where the enemy keeps changing the rules." Vera's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest, maybe. Or recognition. I have a 6-year-old daughter who asked me last week if we were going to be homeless, Ethan continued. I told her no, but I was lying. I have 13 days before our landlord starts eviction proceedings. I've applied to 73 jobs in the past 2 months. I'm qualified for maybe half of them. I got interviews for 18. You're number 18. He felt his hands tighten on the plastic bag holding his resume. So yes, I'm desperate. And no, I don't particularly want to work for someone with a reputation for being impossible. But here's what I can promise you. I will show up every single day at whatever time you tell me to. I will stay until you dismiss me. I will do whatever tasks you assign me exactly the way you want them done. And I will not quit, because quitting means my daughter doesn't eat. That's not passion or enthusiasm or any of the things people usually promise in interviews, but it's real. And it's yours if you'll take it. The study fell silent except for the rain still hammering against the windows. Vera sat motionless in her chair, her dark eyes fixed on Ethan's face with an intensity that made him wonder if he'd just destroyed his last chance at survival. Then she spoke, and her voice carried something he hadn't heard yet. Respect. You're honest. That's rare. She maneuvered her wheelchair back slightly, creating more space between them. I'm going to be equally honest with you, Mr. Cross. I am impossible. I'm demanding. I expect perfection because I can't afford mistakes. When you can't use your hands to fix errors, you learn to catch them before they happen. My last assistant quit because I made her reprint a 30-page report 6 times until the margins were consistent. The one before that walked out after I asked him to work through his lunch break for the 3rd week in a row. The one before that cried in the bathroom and never came back. She paused, and Ethan saw something behind her expression. Not cruelty, but a kind of desperate quality control born from absolute necessity. I built my company on code that doesn't tolerate approximations, Vera continued. I apply the same standard to everything else. And yes, people call me a bitch. They say I'm bitter. They say the accident made me cruel. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What they don't understand is that this isn't cruelty. It's survival. I can't afford assistants who need hand-holding or emotional validation. I need someone who can anticipate problems, execute flawlessly, and keep their feelings to themselves when I'm having a day where existing hurts too much to be polite. Ethan nodded slowly. He understood survival. He'd been living it for 2 years. I'm offering you a trial period, Vera said. 2 weeks. You start tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Not 7:35. Not 7:32. If you're late once, you're done. You'll work until I dismiss you. That might be 6 p.m., might be 10. I don't believe in overtime pay because I pay enough that you shouldn't need it. Salary is $90,000 a year if you make it past the trial. Health insurance starts immediately because I'm not a monster. She held his gaze. But understand this. You will have days where you hate me, days where you wonder if homelessness might be preferable to 1 more hour in my presence. I get migraines that feel like my skull is splitting open. I get nerve pain that makes me say things I wouldn't normally say. On those days, I'm not nice. I'm barely human, and I will expect you to be professional anyway. I can do that, Ethan said, because he could. He'd watched his wife die in increments, had held her hand through pain that made her scream, had learned to be calm when calm was the only thing he could offer. He knew about bad days. He knew about survival. Vera studied him for another long moment, then nodded once. 7:30 tomorrow. Wear something practical. You'll be moving equipment, handling deliveries, running errands. Margaret will give you building access codes and emergency contacts on your way out. She began to maneuver her wheelchair toward the door, then paused. Mr. Cross? One more thing. Yes? Don't feel sorry for me. I'm not someone's tragedy. I'm someone's employer. If you can't separate those two things, this won't work. Understood, Ethan said, standing. Ms. Lang, one more thing from my end. She turned her chair back toward him, eyebrows raised. Thank you for being honest about what this job actually is. I'd rather know I'm walking into a war zone than get surprised by one. Something that might have been approval crossed Vera's face. See you tomorrow, Mr. Cross. Margaret appeared as if summoned, leading Ethan back through the brownstone's expensive hallways to the front entrance. She handed him a folder with building codes, emergency numbers, and a subway card already loaded with enough money for a month of commuting. She hired you, Margaret said, and it wasn't a question. Trial period, 2 weeks. Margaret's expression shifted into something that looked almost like sympathy. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning. Advice: bring lunch. She'll forget to let you eat. And Mr. Cross? She waited until he met her eyes. Most people quit after the first red day. If you can survive one of those, you might actually make it. Red day? You'll know it when it happens. The migraines come in clusters. When she has one, her entire nervous system rebels. Pain makes people cruel. You'll see that firsthand. Just remember it's not personal. Ethan nodded, tucking the folder under his arm. He stepped out into the November rain, which had softened to a drizzle. The subway card in his pocket felt like a lifeline. $90,000 a year. Health insurance. A chance. He walked toward the subway station, pulling out his phone to call the one person who'd been keeping Lily safe during his interviews, Mrs. Rodriguez from 4C, who watched her in exchange for help with her English homework. Ethan, how did it go? I got it, he said, and heard his own voice crack around the words. I got the job. 2-week trial, but I got it. Mrs. Rodriguez let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Gracias a Dios. That baby girl is going to be so happy. She's been worried about you. Tell her daddy's on his way home. Tell her we're going to be okay. He hung up and stood for a moment on the rain-slick sidewalk, letting himself feel something he hadn't allowed in months. Hope. It was fragile, probably premature, wrapped in the knowledge that he had 2 weeks to prove himself to a woman with a reputation for chewing up assistants and spitting them out. But it was something. After months of nothing, it was everything. Sam. Ethan arrived at the brownstone at 7:15 the next morning because arriving at 7:30 felt too much like tempting fate. Margaret let him in with a nod of approval and led him to a small room off the kitchen, his workspace apparently outfitted with a desk, filing cabinets, and a computer connected to Vera's internal systems. She's already awake, Margaret said, handing him a tablet. This is your daily schedule interface. It syncs with her calendar, updates in real time. When she needs you, a notification will appear. When she's dismissed you for the day, you'll get an alert. Don't assume anything. If you don't have explicit permission to leave, you stay. Ethan nodded, studying the tablet. The interface was elegant, clearly custom designed. Today's schedule showed a 9 a.m. video conference with her company's board, an 11 a.m. call with patent attorneys, and a 2 p.m. meeting with potential investors. Between each item were tasks assigned to him. Prepare conference materials, organize legal documents, compile financial reports. Coffee is in the kitchen, make enough for both of you. She takes it black, no sugar, in the blue mug on the second shelf. Temperature matters. Too hot, and she can't hold it safely. Too cold, and she'll notice. Aim for 140 degrees. She can't, Ethan started, then stopped, recalibrating. She has limited hand mobility. Limited is generous. She has some finger movement on good days, can manipulate a trackball, can grip with assistance, but holding a standard coffee mug requires adaptation. Margaret pulled open a drawer revealing specialized cups with easy grip handles and weighted bases. You'll learn what she needs before she has to ask. That's the job. Anticipate, execute, disappear. For the next hour, Margaret walked Ethan through the systems that kept Vera's life functioning. The adaptive technology throughout the brownstone, voice-controlled lights, automated doors, a home system that monitored temperature, humidity, and air quality because Vera's compromised nervous system made her sensitive to environmental changes. The medication schedule, a complex rotation of pain management, muscle relaxants, and supplements that had to be prepared at specific times. The physical therapy equipment in the home gym, the dietary restrictions, the emergency protocols in case of autonomic dysreflexia. It was overwhelming. It was also fascinating. This entire brownstone was essentially a sophisticated support system for one woman who refused to let her body's betrayal slow her down. At 7:45, the tablet buzzed. Miss Lang requires assistance in her office. Ethan found Vera positioned at her desk, 3 monitors displaying code he couldn't begin to parse. She glanced up as he entered, her expression neutral. Coffee. Then I need you to print the board materials. They're in the folder labeled Q4 Review on my desktop. Print 2 copies, standard paper, double-sided, stapled top left. Board package needs to be in the conference room by 8:45. Don't interrupt my work unless the building is on fire. Understood. Ethan headed to the kitchen, measured coffee beans with the precision of someone who'd once calculated derivatives for a living, monitored the water temperature, aimed for the exact specifications Margaret had given him. He poured it into the blue mug and carried it back to Vera's office, setting it on her desk in the exact spot where a faded ring on the wood suggested it always went. Vera didn't look up, but he heard her murmur, "Temperature?" He'd checked. 142 degrees. Close enough. She continued typing, slowly, he noticed, using a specialized trackball that allowed her to navigate with minimal hand movement. The keyboard was modified too, with oversized keys that required less precise motor control. Ethan moved to her computer, opened the specified folder, began printing. While the printer hummed, he scanned through the materials, quarterly financial reports, market analysis, competitive positioning. This was the language he used to speak fluently, back when his life had margins and structure and a trajectory that made sense. He assembled the board packages with careful attention to detail, checking each page for alignment, making sure the staples sat perfectly in the top left corners. By 8:43, both packages sat on the conference room table, positioned where Vera's wheelchair could easily reach them. His tablet buzzed. Conference room. Take notes. The board meeting happened via video conference, Vera's face appearing on a massive monitor, while 9 other faces filled the screen in a grid. Ethan sat out of camera range with the laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as Vera led the board through quarterly performance with the kind of precision that made it clear why she'd built a multi-million-dollar company. She was brilliant, not in the vague way people use the word to describe anyone with money, but genuinely, undeniably brilliant. She anticipated questions before they were asked, dismantled objections with data, redirected conversations with surgical precision. When one board member suggested they pivot away from their privacy-focused positioning to pursue more lucrative data harvesting opportunities, Vera's response was devastating. If we abandon our principles for short-term profit, we become exactly what we're fighting against. I didn't build this company to sell user data. I built it to prove you could do tech differently. If you want to pivot toward exploitation, find another CEO. Silence on the other end. Then the board member backed down. The meeting ran until 10:47. When the screen went dark, Vera sat motionless for a moment, and Ethan saw something he hadn't noticed before. Exhaustion. Not the normal kind from a hard meeting, but something deeper. Her jaw was tight, her breathing carefully controlled. "Notes?" she asked, her voice slightly strained. Ethan had already formatted them, clean, organized, highlighting action items and decisions. He'd learned this skill at Blackstone, when junior associates lived and died by their ability to capture meeting nuances. He pulled up the document on her monitor. Vera scrolled through with her trackball, and Ethan watched her expression shift from neutral to something that might have been surprised. "These are good, better than good. You captured subtext I didn't think anyone else noticed. The part where Collins was laying groundwork to challenge your leadership in Q2, I flagged it in red." Vera's eyes cut to him sharply. "You saw that. He praised your vision twice in 3 minutes. Nobody does that unless they're positioning for a takeover bid." Ethan kept his voice level. "He'll probably propose a vote of no confidence at the spring meeting, frame it as concern for the company's direction now that your health issues are public knowledge." For the first time, Vera smiled. A real smile, sharp and fierce. "You're not just a pretty face with an MBA." "No, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. It makes me feel ancient." She turned back to her monitors. "We have an hour before the patent call. I need you to organize the legal documents. They're a mess because my last assistant thought alphabetical order was optional. File them by date, cross-reference by patent number, make sure the attorney has access to everything before the call." "On it." Ethan headed to the filing room where he found exactly the disaster Vera had described. He spent the next 53 minutes creating order from chaos, building a system that would make future retrieval effortless. His phone buzzed twice with texts from Mrs. Rodriguez. Lily was fine. She'd eaten breakfast. She was drawing more pictures. He responded quickly and returned to work. The patent call was a masterclass in negotiation. Vera defended her company's intellectual property against a tech giant trying to claim her privacy algorithms infringed on their existing patents. She demolished their arguments with prior art, documented development timelines, and a technical understanding so deep that even the opposing attorneys seemed impressed. When the call ended, victory secured, settlement avoided. Vera dismissed him with a wave. "Lunch! Be back in 45 minutes." Ethan grabbed his packed sandwich and ate it on a bench in Gramercy Park, watching the November wind strip the last leaves from the trees. He checked his bank account on his phone. The first paycheck was still 10 days away, but knowing it was coming made the $17 in his wallet feel less like a countdown to catastrophe. He was back at 1:43, 2 minutes early. His tablet directed him to help Vera transition from her desk to a different wheelchair. A transport chair, Margaret explained, lighter weight for movement between rooms. Ethan had never assisted someone with paralysis before. He approached it the way he'd approach any technical problem, carefully, asking questions, following Vera's precise instructions about hand placement and transfer technique. "Most people hesitate because they're afraid of hurting me," Vera said as he helped position her arms. "Don't hesitate. Hesitation creates instability. Be confident or be useless." He was confident. The transfer went smoothly. The investor meeting was different from the board call, less adversarial, more seductive. Vera pitched an expansion of her privacy infrastructure to a group of venture capitalists who probably made her annual salary in a month. She was charm itself, painting a vision of ethical tech that somehow promised both principles and profits. Ethan watched her transform. The person who'd been curt and demanding with him became warm, persuasive, magnetic on camera. She made jokes. She asked about the investors' families. She wielded her disability like a narrative tool, not for pity, but as proof of her commitment to accessible design. It was a performance, Ethan realized. Maybe all of it was a performance. The demanding boss, the brilliant CEO, the woman who'd survived catastrophe. Maybe when you lost the ability to control your own body, you compensated by controlling everything else with absolute precision. The meeting ended with handshakes, virtual ones anyway, and commitments to follow up. Vera rolled back from the camera and let out a long breath. "That was exhausting," she said, and Ethan heard the real person under the performance. "You were impressive." "I was competent, there's a difference." She glanced at him. "They'll invest, they always do, because I make money, and I'm good copy. Disabled woman builds tech empire. It's the kind of story investors love to tell at cocktail parties." Her voice carried an edge of bitterness. "They want me to be inspirational. It's simpler than admitting they're investing because I'm profitable." Ethan didn't respond because he sensed she wasn't looking for reassurance. "I need 2 hours of uninterrupted work time," Vera said. "Check the task list on your tablet. Everything there needs to be done before end of day. Don't bother me unless it's urgent." He spent the afternoon processing invoices, coordinating with vendors, scheduling future meetings, and learning the intricate dance of Vera's professional life. The task list was extensive but manageable if he worked efficiently. He finished at 5:47, checked his tablet, and saw no dismissal alert. So he waited. At 6:15, Margaret appeared. "She's in the home gym. Physical therapy session. She'll be another hour at least." Ethan nodded, using the time to organize his workspace, familiarize himself with the filing systems, prepare for tomorrow. At 7:23, his tablet finally buzzed. "You're dismissed. See you tomorrow, 7:30 sharp." He made it home by 8:15, exhausted but intact. Lily launched herself at him the moment he walked through the door, her small arms wrapping around his waist with the desperation of a 6-year-old who'd spent all day worrying. "Did they like you, Daddy? Do you get to keep the job?" "So far, baby girl, so far." He picked her up even though she was getting too big for it, buried his face in her hair that smelled like Mrs. Rodriguez's lavender soap. 2 weeks. If I can last 2 weeks, we're okay. You'll last, Lily said with the absolute certainty of childhood faith. You're the best daddy ever. Ethan held her tighter and hoped she was right. The first week passed in a blur of tasks, meetings, and gradual learning. Ethan learned Vera's rhythms, the way she worked in intense bursts followed by periods of stillness where pain clearly overwhelmed everything else. He learned to read her silences, to know when she needed coffee and when she needed space, to anticipate problems before they became crises. He learned that Margaret had understated things. Vera wasn't just demanding, she was exacting in ways that would have driven most people insane. She wanted her files organized with mathematical precision. She wanted emails answered within specific timeframes depending on sender priority. She wanted her schedule managed with an understanding of how her energy levels fluctuated throughout the day, clustering high-focus work in the mornings when pain was manageable, saving routine tasks for afternoons when she was visibly struggling. And Ethan delivered. He drew on every skill he'd learned at Blackstone, every coping mechanism he'd developed while watching Emily die. Every ounce of determination that came from knowing his daughter's stability depended on his success. When Vera asked for something to be redone, he redid it without complaint. When she snapped at him over minor errors, he corrected them and moved on. When she worked until 9 p.m., he stayed until she dismissed him. On day 5, Margaret pulled him aside. "She's impressed with you. She won't say it, but I can tell. You're the first assistant in 6 months who's made it to day 5 without crying or quitting." "What happened to the others?" Ethan asked. Margaret's expression grew careful. "Most couldn't handle the red days. You haven't had one yet." Soon, Margaret said. "They come in clusters, usually every 2 to 3 weeks. You'll know." The red day came on day 8. Ethan arrived at 7:15 as usual. Margaret met him at the door, her face grave. "She's having a migraine. Started around 4 this morning. It's bad, autonomic symptoms, nerve pain, the whole cascade. She insisted on working anyway because she has investor calls she can't reschedule. I'm telling you this so you understand that whatever happens today, it's not about you. The pain makes her a different person." Ethan found Vera in her office, sitting in near darkness with blackout shades drawn. The monitors were dimmed to almost nothing. She wore sunglasses even in the gloom, and when she spoke, her voice was tight with the kind of control that came from barely holding yourself together. "Get me ice, crushed, not cubed, in a bag, not a cup, and turn off the HVAC. The sound is unbearable." He brought the ice. He adjusted the environmental controls. He prepared her medications with the careful precision Margaret had taught him, bringing them with water at the exact temperature she could manage. "You're breathing too loudly," Vera said. "Go stand in the hallway." He did. For the next 3 hours, he worked from his tablet in the hallway, responding to her terse, typed messages as she prepared for meetings she clearly shouldn't be taking. When the first investor call began, he heard her voice through the door, warm, professional, completely masking the agony he knew she was experiencing. Between calls, she summoned him. "The financial reports have an error on page 17. Find it. Fix it. Reprint the entire document." Ethan found the error, a decimal point in the wrong position, caught in his third read-through. He corrected it, reprinted, brought her the new version. She scanned it with eyes that looked like they were barely focusing. "Still wrong, page 9. The formatting is inconsistent with page 12. He looked. The font was identical. The margins were identical. But she was right. The line spacing was off by half a point, something no reasonable person would notice and even fewer would care about. He fixed it. He reprinted it. He brought it back. "Good," Vera said. "Now get out." He got out. The second call was worse than the first. Ethan heard her voice waver once, just slightly, before she locked it down. He imagined what it cost her to project competence while her nervous system was actively betraying her, and he felt something like respect mixed with horror. At 3 p.m., she sent him a message. "Need bathroom assistance. Get Margaret." Margaret was at the physical therapist's office with her own mother. Ethan replied, "She's unavailable. I can help or we can wait. Now." "I don't have time to wait." He entered the office. Vera sat motionless in her chair, jaw clenched so tight he could see the muscles jumping in her cheek. "I need to transfer to the bathroom. I can't wait for Margaret. You're going to have to help me." "Tell me what to do." She did, her voice clipped and clinical, walking him through the transfer technique, the careful positioning, the dignity-stripping reality of what happened when your body stopped cooperating. Ethan followed her instructions exactly, his mind retreating into the same professional detachment he'd used when Emily could no longer manage basic functions on her own. This was just problem-solving. This was just helping another human being maintain dignity when their body tried to steal it. He could do this. When they returned to her office, Vera's face was flushed with something that might have been humiliation or might have been rage, probably both. If you ever tell anyone about this, I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you never work again. I won't tell anyone, Ethan said quietly, and I don't judge you for needing help. I don't want your fucking understanding, Vera snapped. I want you to do your job and keep your observations to yourself. Okay. She dismissed him with a sharp gesture. He spent the rest of the afternoon working in his office while she finished her calls, her messages growing progressively terser as the day wore on. At 7 p.m., she finally sent him home. He left the brownstone emotionally exhausted, his phone buzzing with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Lily is worried. She says you seem sad. He wasn't sad. He was something else, something more complicated than sadness, something that involved witnessing another person's suffering and being unable to do anything except not make it worse. When he got home, Lily wrapped herself around him like she always did. Bad day, Daddy? Long day, baby. Not bad, just long. Did your boss yell at you? A little, but it's okay. Sometimes people get frustrated. Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone who'd learned too young that adults didn't always have all the answers. Mrs. Rodriguez says people are mean when they hurt. Does your boss hurt? Smart kid. Too smart, maybe. Yeah, baby, she hurts a lot. Then you should be extra nice to her, Lily said, as if kindness were simple. Ethan wished it were. The next morning, he arrived at 7:15 again. Margaret met him at the door, and he saw relief in her expression. You came back. Why wouldn't I? Yesterday was a red day. Most assistants quit after the first one. She studied him. Vera wants to see you. She's in her office. Ethan found Vera at her desk, sunglasses off, monitors at normal brightness. She looked tired but human again, the tight control replaced with something closer to regular exhaustion. You're still here, she said. Was I not supposed to be? I was cruel to you yesterday. You were in pain. That's not an excuse. I didn't say it was. I said it was a reason. Ethan met her eyes. I'm not here because you're easy to work for. I'm here because I need this job and you need someone who won't quit. That arrangement doesn't change because you had a bad day. Vera studied him for a long moment. Most people can't separate the pain from the person. They take everything personally. They need reassurance and apologies. I'm not most people. No, Vera said slowly. You're not. She turned back to her monitors. We have a board presentation to prepare. It needs to be perfect. Collins is looking for ammunition to undermine my leadership. I need you to help me build a case that's unassailable. Then let's build it, Ethan said. They worked side by side for the next 5 hours, Ethan translating Vera's strategic vision into slide decks and financial models that told an irrefutable story of competent leadership. He asked questions. She answered them. Gradually, something shifted in the dynamic between them, less employer and employee, more something that resembled collaboration. By the end of his second week, Ethan had made it past the trial period. Vera called him into her office on Friday afternoon, her expression unreadable. You've passed the trial. Salary starts Monday. Health insurance paperwork is on your desk. Fill it out this weekend. She paused. You're the first assistant in 18 months who's made it this far. Don't make me regret keeping you. I won't, Ethan promised, and he meant it. As he walked home that evening, his phone showed a notification. First paycheck deposited. $90,000 divided by 26 pay periods. Enough to pay rent. Enough to catch up on Lily's school fees. Enough to buy groceries without counting every dollar. He stopped at a bodega and bought Lily a chocolate bar. A small celebration, but the first one they'd had in months. When he got home, she was waiting by the window like always. He handed her the chocolate and watched her face light up. You kept the job, Daddy? I kept the job, baby girl. Lily threw her arms around him, and Ethan let himself believe just for a moment that maybe they were going to be okay after all. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Ethan learned the architecture of Vera's days, the way mornings belonged to strategic work when her mind was sharpest, how afternoons required careful management as fatigue accumulated, the precise timing of medication that kept pain manageable but never absent. He learned which silences meant she was concentrating and which meant she was struggling. He learned to read the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers would still on the trackball when a wave of pain hit, the almost imperceptible shift in her breathing that preceded the bad days. He also learned that beneath the exacting demands and sharp edges, Vera Lang was fundamentally decent. She never asked him to do anything unethical. She paid vendors on time, treated service workers with respect, and donated quietly to causes she believed in. Disability rights organizations, children's hospitals, scholarship funds for first-generation college students. The cruelty people accused her of wasn't cruelty at all. It was the desperate efficiency of someone who couldn't afford weakness in a world that already saw her as diminished. December arrived with the kind of cold that made the city feel brittle. Ethan's morning commute became an exercise in layering, his one winter coat over a sweater over two shirts, trying to trap enough warmth to survive the walk from the subway. Lily had outgrown her winter boots, and he'd been piecing together solutions with plastic bags inside her sneakers until the first paycheck cleared enough debt that he could buy her proper ones. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into his permanent employment, Ethan arrived to find Margaret in the kitchen with an expression that immediately set off his internal alarms. "Collins made his move," she said without preamble. "Emergency board meeting called for Friday. He's pushing for a vote of no confidence, claiming Vera's health issues compromise her ability to lead effectively." "That's what we've been preparing for," Ethan said, though his stomach tightened. He'd spent weeks helping Vera build an ironclad case for her continued leadership, financial performance data, strategic roadmaps, testimonials from key clients. But preparation was different from actual combat. "She's been working since 5 a.m., Margaret continued. "She won't eat, she won't take breaks. She's going to burn herself out before Friday if someone doesn't intervene." "Has anyone tried?" Margaret's look was pointed. "She doesn't listen to me anymore. Says I coddle her, but she listens to you." Ethan found Vera in her office, surrounded by virtual windows of data projected across her 3 monitors. Her eyes had the glazed intensity of someone who'd been staring at screens for hours without rest. An untouched plate of toast sat on her desk, cold and abandoned. "I need updated market analysis for the Q4 comparison," she said without looking up. "And someone from Collins's camp has been leaking board communications. I need you to trace the email headers, find out who." "I'll do both," Ethan said, "after you eat something and take a 10-minute break." Her eyes cut to him, sharp and dangerous. "I don't have time for breaks." "You have time for 10 minutes. If you collapse before Friday, Collins wins by default." He kept his voice level, matter of fact. "Eat. I'll make fresh coffee. Then we'll tackle the market analysis together." For a moment, he thought she might unleash the same fury he'd witnessed on red days. Instead, she let out a long breath and reached for the toast with hands that trembled slightly. Fatigue or pain, he couldn't tell. "You're annoyingly right," she muttered, taking a bite. Ethan made coffee the way she liked it, returned to find her finishing the toast. Her shoulders had lost some of their rigid tension. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I forget sometimes that I have physical limitations." "You have the same limitations as everyone else," Ethan corrected. "You just manage them differently." Something flickered across her face. Gratitude, maybe, or relief at being treated as normal. "The market analysis needs to show we've outperformed competitors despite industry headwinds. Collins will argue that any success is momentum from before the accident, that current trajectory shows decline." "Then we'll show current metrics," Ethan said, already pulling up financial databases. "Quarter-over-quarter growth, customer retention rates, new contract acquisitions. Facts he can't spin." They worked in tandem for the next 3 hours, Ethan running analyses while Vera interpreted implications, both of them building a narrative that was airtight and undeniable. It reminded Ethan of his Blackstone days, the intellectual satisfaction of solving complex problems, of seeing patterns in data that others missed. He'd forgotten how much he'd loved this part of his old life. Around noon, Vera's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression hardened. Collins's assistant just sent a meeting agenda. He's allocated 45 minutes for discussion of leadership continuity planning. That's corporate speak for a coup. She looked at Ethan. "I need ammunition, something that makes removing me obviously self-destructive for the board." Ethan thought for a moment, his mind shifting through possibilities. What if we flip the narrative? Instead of defending your current leadership, present an expansion plan that's so compelling they can't afford to lose you. Show them what they'll miss if they force you out. Vera's eyes lit with the particular gleam that meant she'd found an angle worth pursuing. Keep talking. You've been approached by 3 major corporations for acquisition offers in the past year, right? All of which you declined because you won't compromise on privacy principles. Right. So we present a strategic roadmap that positions the company for either acquisition at premium valuation or continued independent growth. But critically, a roadmap that only works with your leadership because it's built on relationships and reputation you've personally cultivated. Make it clear that removing you doesn't just lose a CEO, it loses the strategic vision and industry credibility that makes the company valuable. Vera was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the armrest of her wheelchair. That's good. That's very good. It reframes the conversation from whether I'm capable to whether they can afford to bet against me. She turned to her monitors. I need you to draft the expansion proposal. 5-year roadmap, market opportunity analysis, competitive positioning. Make it visionary but grounded in realistic projections. I'll have a draft by end of day. Make it by 6 p.m. I want to review it before I lose mental clarity. Ethan spent the afternoon building the kind of strategic proposal he used to create for Blackstone clients. Comprehensive, data-driven, compelling. He outlined expansion into European markets, detailed regulatory landscape advantages Vera's privacy-focused approach provided, projected revenue growth that would make board members salivate. He made it clear that this wasn't generic strategy any CEO could execute. This was specifically built on Vera's reputation, her technical expertise, her relationships with privacy advocates and regulators. He finished at 5:47. Vera reviewed it in silence, scrolling through page after page while Ethan waited. Finally, she looked up. This is MBA-level strategic thinking. Actually, it's better than most MBA work I've seen. Her gaze was curious, assessing. You were on partner track at Blackstone. You should be running your own deals, not organizing my files. Life had different plans, Ethan said simply. Life. Right. Vera's tone carried something between skepticism and sympathy. You gave up a career most people would kill for. I didn't give it up. It got taken from me. There's a difference. Vera studied him for a long moment. Emily's death wasn't the end of your career. You could have found another firm, negotiated reduced hours, hired full-time childcare. People do it all the time. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. People do it when they have support systems, parents, siblings, trust funds. I had medical debt and a traumatized 6-year-old who stopped sleeping through the night. Firms don't offer partner track to people who need to leave by 5:30 every day for daycare pickup. Fair point, Vera said. She turned back to the proposal. This is excellent work. We'll use it as the foundation for Friday's defense. I need you in the board meeting. You'll present the financial sections while I handle strategic vision and stakeholder relationships. You want me in the room? You built half the argument. You should be there to defend it. Vera's expression was matter-of-fact. Besides, Collins will assume I'm too proud to ask for help. Showing up with a competent team member undermines his narrative about my inability to delegate. Ethan nodded slowly. I'll prepare presenter notes. Good. Now go home. Your daughter probably wants to see you before she falls asleep. It was the first time Vera had referenced Lily directly, acknowledging that Ethan had a life outside these walls. Something about it felt significant, though Ethan couldn't quite articulate why. That evening, he arrived home to find Lily at the kitchen table with Mrs. Rodriguez, working on a math worksheet that looked too advanced for first grade. His daughter's face lit up when she saw him. Daddy, I did multiplication today. Mrs. Rodriguez taught me. You've been teaching her multiplication? Ethan asked, surprised. Mrs. Rodriguez shrugged with a smile. She was bored with addition. Smart girl, you're Lily. She needs challenges. Ethan felt a familiar ache in his chest, the knowledge that his daughter was growing and learning and needing things he wasn't always present to provide. Thank you for pushing her forward. De nada. She reminds me of my granddaughter, curious about everything. Mrs. Rodriguez stood, gathering her things. You look tired, mijo. Take care of yourself too, okay? That baby needs you healthy. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Ethan heated up the casserole she'd left for them and sat with Lily while she told him about her day. Playground politics, a book about butterflies, her teacher's new glasses. Normal kid stuff, the kind of ordinary moments that felt precious because they'd been so scarce. Daddy, Lily asked as he tucked her into bed, are we still poor? The question hit him like a punch. Why do you ask that, baby? Katie at school said her mom said we're poor because we live in a small apartment and I have old clothes. Lily's voice was matter of fact, but Ethan could see the worry in her eyes. I told her we're not poor. We just don't have extra money. That's different, right? Ethan sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. We have enough, Lily. We have food, we have a home, we have each other. Some people have more money than us, and some people have less. Neither one makes someone better or worse. But Katie said, Katie's learning about the world, just like you are. Sometimes people say things that aren't kind because they don't understand yet. He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. What matters is that we're safe, we're together, and we take care of each other. That's what makes a family rich. Lily considered this with the gravity of someone much older than 6. I think we're rich then, because I have the best daddy. Ethan kissed her forehead, his throat tight. And I have the best daughter. Now sleep. Tomorrow's Thursday, which means library day. He waited until her breathing evened out, then retreated to the apartment's tiny living space that doubled as his bedroom. He pulled out his laptop and spent another 2 hours refining the board presentation, making sure every data point was bulletproof, every projection was defensible. Collins would look for any weakness to exploit. Ethan couldn't give him one. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. Ethan dressed in his interview suit, still his only suit, but he dry cleaned it and it looked almost professional. He arrived at the brownstone at 6:30 to find Vera already awake, positioned at her desk in the dark. Couldn't sleep, she said when he entered. Kept running scenarios in my head. Nervous? Terrified, she admitted, and the honesty was startling. I've fought board challenges before, but never when they had legitimate ammunition. My condition is progressive. Even with treatment, I'm not getting better. Collins knows that. The board knows that. I'm asking them to bet on someone whose body is actively failing. Ethan sat down across from her. You're asking them to bet on someone whose mind is sharper than anyone else in the room. Someone who built a company from nothing and has consistently outperformed market expectations. Your body's limitations are irrelevant to your strategic value. Are they? Vera's voice was bitter. I can't shake hands at conferences. I can't travel without extensive accommodations. I need assistance to handle basic functions. That's a liability, Ethan. We can dress it up with inspirational language, but at the end of the day, I'm expensive and complicated to work with. So is every brilliant person, Ethan countered. Steve Jobs was famously difficult. Musk burns through executives. Genius is always complicated. Your complications just happen to be physical instead of temperamental. That doesn't make them more disqualifying. Vera looked at him for a long moment. You actually believe that? I do. Most people think I'm brave for continuing to work, like showing up despite disability is some kind of heroic act. Her voice carried frustration. I'm not brave, I'm just competent. There's a difference. I know, Ethan said. That's why we're not selling bravery today. We're selling competence. Undeniable, data-driven competence. Something in Vera's expression shifted, resolve replacing doubt. Then let's show them competence. They spent the morning doing final preparation. Margaret arrived at 7 to help Vera with morning routines, then hovered anxiously as board call time approached. At 9:58 a.m., Vera positioned herself in front of her cameras, Ethan seated just out of frame with his own laptop ready. The board members appeared on screen one by one. Collins was there, of course. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of polished appearance that came from country clubs and corner offices. He offered Vera a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Vera, thank you for making time for this conversation. I know these discussions are never easy. Let's skip the pleasantries, Richard, Vera said coolly. You called this meeting to question my fitness for leadership. I'm here to demonstrate why that's a mistake. Collins had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. This isn't personal. It's about the company's future. Your health challenges are well documented, and the board has legitimate concerns about continuity and stability. Then let's address those concerns with data instead of speculation. Vera pulled up the first slide of their presentation, stark white background, clean text, undeniable numbers. Company performance since my accident. Revenue up 37%, customer retention at 92%, 3 major contracts acquired with Fortune 500 clients. If my health is compromising leadership, the metrics don't reflect it. She walked them through quarter after quarter of growth, each data point a hammer blow against Collins's narrative. Ethan watched the board members' faces, some nodding, some taking notes, Collins's expression growing progressively tighter. Performance metrics are lagging indicators, Collins interjected. They reflect decisions made before your accident. The question is whether current trajectory remains strong. Excellent point, Vera said smoothly. Ethan, pull up the current quarter projections. Ethan shared his screen, displaying the financial models they'd built. Current quarter shows continued growth, 8% over Q3, with client acquisition exceeding targets by 15%. These results reflect strategic decisions made in the past 6 months, all under Vera's direct leadership. Collins's eyes narrowed. And you are? Ethan Cross, Ms. Lang's executive assistant and strategic advisor. I've been analyzing company performance and competitive positioning for the past 2 months. Ethan kept his voice professional, academic. The data shows consistent excellence regardless of Ms. Lang's physical condition. An assistant's loyalty is hardly objective analysis, Collins said dismissively. Then consider objective third-party assessments, Vera cut in, pulling up another slide. Industry analysts rank us as top performers in privacy-focused tech. Client satisfaction surveys show 98% approval. Regulatory compliance remains flawless. These aren't opinions, they're measurable facts. She continued systematically demolishing every argument Collins had prepared. When he questioned her ability to travel for business development, she showed video conferences that had closed major deals. When he suggested she couldn't maintain industry relationships, she provided testimonials from key partners praising her leadership. When he implied her condition affected strategic thinking, she presented the expansion roadmap Ethan had helped develop, visionary, detailed, built on deep market understanding. By the time Vera finished, 45 minutes had become 90. The board sat in silence, the weight of evidence hanging in the virtual air between them. The question before you isn't whether I'm disabled, Vera said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. The question is whether disability disqualifies competence. If you believe it does, vote me out. But understand what you're losing: strategic vision, industry credibility, and a CEO who's proven she can deliver results regardless of physical limitations. The choice is yours. The board chair, a woman named Patricia, who'd been silent throughout, spoke carefully. I think we need time to digest this information. Richard, your concerns are noted, but frankly, the performance data speaks loudly. I'm not comfortable proceeding with a leadership change without much stronger justification than has been presented today. Other board members murmured agreement. Collins's face had gone rigid with barely concealed frustration. We'll table this discussion, Patricia continued. But Vera, I want quarterly check-ins going forward. Not because we doubt you, but because transparency builds confidence. Can you commit to that? Absolutely, Vera said. I welcome accountability. The meeting ended without a vote. Collins signed off quickly, his defeat written in the tightness around his eyes. The other board members offered congratulations and support before disconnecting. When the screens went dark, Vera sat motionless for a long moment. Then she let out a breath that might have been a laugh or a sob. We did it, she said. That pompous bastard tried to remove me and we crushed him. You crushed him, Ethan corrected. I just provided supporting data. You provided the framework that made crushing him possible. Vera turned her chair to face him directly. That expansion roadmap was brilliant. The way you positioned everything around my specific strategic value, Collins couldn't argue against it without sounding discriminatory. That was intentional, wasn't it? I'd call it strategic framing, Ethan said carefully. I'd call it corporate warfare executed with precision. Vera's smile was sharp and genuine. You're wasted as an assistant. You should be running strategy. I'm exactly where I need to be, Ethan said, and meant it. Besides, Running strategy doesn't pay $90,000 a year with immediate health insurance. Vera laughed, a real laugh, not the careful version she used in meetings. Fair point. Well, if you're going to keep organizing my files, at least I know you're overqualified for it. Margaret appeared with lunch. Neither of them had requested, but both clearly needed. They ate in Vera's office, the tension of the morning gradually dissipating into something that felt almost comfortable. Tell me about Lily, Vera said suddenly. You've mentioned her a few times, but never details. What's she like? The question surprised Ethan. In 2 months of working together, Vera had maintained strict professional boundaries. No personal questions, no casual conversation beyond work topics. Now she was asking about his daughter with what seemed like genuine curiosity. She's 6, smart, curious, worries about things kids shouldn't have to worry about. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed Vera the picture Lily had drawn, the 2 stick figures holding hands. She made this the morning of my interview with you, told me it was for good luck. Vera studied the picture with unexpected focus. She's talented. The proportions are sophisticated for her age. She draws constantly. Fill entire notebooks with stories about butterflies and princesses and adventures. Ethan felt his throat tighten slightly. Her mom used to read to her every night. Now I do, but I'm not as good at the voices. I'm sure you're fine, Vera said, her voice gentler than he'd ever heard it. Presence matters more than performance when it comes to kids. You sound like you know something about it. I was a kid once, had parents who were great at performance, terrible at presence. Vera's expression turned distant. They wanted me to be a pianist, paid for the best teachers, pushed me to competitions, never asked if I actually enjoyed it. She refocused on Ethan. Is Lily happy? I think so, Ethan said honestly. She understands our life is different now, that we don't have the things she used to have. But she's adapting. Kids are resilient that way. Or they're good at hiding things to protect their parents, Vera said quietly. Don't assume she's okay just because she seems okay. The insight felt personal, drawn from experience. Ethan wondered what Vera had hidden as a child, what performances she'd given to spare her parents the truth of her feelings. I'll remember that, he said. They finished lunch in companionable silence, and Ethan felt the professional boundaries between them shift slightly, not dissolving, but softening at the edges. He was still her assistant, she was still his employer, but something else was emerging beneath those roles. Mutual respect, maybe, a recognition between 2 people who'd both learned to survive conditions that would have broken others. The rest of December passed in a blur of year-end work, closing out accounts, preparing tax documentation, strategic planning for the new year. The red days came with their usual brutal regularity, and Ethan handled them with the same steady competence he brought to everything else. He learned to recognize the warning signs early. Vera's increasing terseness, the way her movements became more careful, the subtle tightness around her eyes that preceded full-blown migraines. On those days, he adjusted without being asked. He dimmed lights, managed her schedule to minimize stress, handled external communications so she could focus on essential tasks without the additional burden of politeness. And when she snapped at him, which she did, because pain made everyone mean, he absorbed it without taking it personally, the same way he'd absorbed Emily's pain-driven anger in those final months. Christmas week brought unexpected challenges. Lily's school closed for break, and Mrs. Rodriguez was traveling to visit family in Puerto Rico. Ethan had lined up a daycare center, but it fell through when they suddenly closed due to a COVID outbreak. He spent 2 frantic days trying to find alternative childcare, each option either unavailable or prohibitively expensive. Finally, on December 23rd, he had to make the call he'd been dreading. He found Vera in her office reviewing financial reports and knocked on the doorframe. I have a situation, he said. My childcare arrangement fell through. I've tried everything, but I'm out of options. I need to take tomorrow and Friday off to stay home with Lily. I know it's terrible timing with year-end closing. Bring her here, Vera interrupted. Ethan blinked. I'm sorry? Bring your daughter here. She can stay in the library. It's quiet. She can draw or read. You'll be nearby if she needs you. I don't work Christmas Eve or Christmas Day anyway, so you'll have those off. But tomorrow we need to finalize Q4 reports, and I need you here. Vera, I can't bring a 6-year-old to your home. Why not? It's not like she'll break anything important. Kids know how to sit quietly. Vera's tone was matter of fact. Besides, I'm curious to meet the person you're doing all this for. Ethan felt something complicated happen in his chest, gratitude mixed with fear mixed with a hope he didn't want to examine too closely. If she bothers you at all, just tell me and I'll figure something else out. She won't bother me. Bring her tomorrow at 7:30. That night, Ethan explained to Lily that she'd be coming to work with him. She was thrilled, treating it like an adventure rather than a childcare emergency. She packed her backpack with crayons, coloring books, and the chapter book about butterflies she'd been reading with Mrs. Rodriguez. Will your boss be mean to me? Lily asked as they rode the subway the next morning. No, baby, she's not mean. She's just very focused on her work. You'll need to be quiet and stay in the library where I set you up, okay? No running around, no loud noises. I can be quiet, Lily promised, like a butterfly landing on a flower. They arrived at the brownstone at 7:15. Margaret met them at the door, her eyebrows rising when she saw Lily. Well, she said, studying Lily with the assessing gaze of someone who'd raised children. You must be Lily. I'm Margaret. Your dad's told me about your drawings. I can show you, Lily said, already reaching for her backpack. Later, Ethan said gently. First, let's get you settled in the library. He set Lily up at a table near the window, where natural light would be good for her eyes. She spread out her coloring books with the serious concentration of someone beginning important work, and Ethan felt his heart twist at how small she looked in the enormous room. I'll check on you every hour, he promised. If you need anything before that, you come find me. My office is down the hall, third door on the left. Remember? Third door on the left, Lily repeated dutifully. Daddy, is your boss really in a wheelchair? Yes, she was in an accident and her legs don't work anymore, but she's still a regular person who just moves differently. You treat her with respect like you'd treat anyone, okay? Okay, Lily said. Then, with the blunt curiosity of children, does it make her sad? Sometimes, probably, but mostly she just focuses on her work and doesn't let it stop her from doing important things. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Be good, baby girl. He left her there, sunshine catching in her dark hair, bent over a coloring book with fierce concentration. His office felt emptier knowing she was down the hall, simultaneously closer and more vulnerable than when she was safely with Mrs. Rodriguez. At 8 o'clock, Vera called him to her office. She was positioned at her desk as usual, monitors glowing with data. Your daughter arrived? She's in the library. I've explained she needs to be quiet and stay put. If she becomes disruptive at all, stop apologizing preemptively, Vera said. I offered this arrangement. Let's see how it works. She pulled up the Q4 reports. We need to reconcile these discrepancies in the vendor payments. Looks like someone transposed numbers in 3 separate invoices. They worked for the next 2 hours, Ethan splitting his attention between financial reconciliation and internal worry about Lily. At 10 o'clock, he excused himself to check on her. He found her exactly where he'd left her, now working on a drawing instead of coloring. She looked up when he entered, her face bright. Daddy, look! I drew the butterflies from my book! The drawing was remarkably good. Butterflies with anatomically correct wing patterns, arranged around flowers she'd rendered with careful attention to petal structure. She'd even included labels identifying species. This is beautiful, baby. You've been good? Super quiet, like you said. She hesitated. Is it lunchtime soon? I'm hungry. Ethan checked his watch. 10:15. Not quite yet. Can you hold on until noon? I guess, Lily said, trying to hide her disappointment. Ethan returned to Vera's office feeling guilty. He should have brought more snacks, should have planned better for keeping a 6-year-old occupied and fed for a full work day. She okay? Vera asked without looking up from her screens. She's fine, hungry, but fine. There's a kitchen full of food. Margaret keeps it stocked like we're preparing for siege warfare. Your daughter can eat whenever she wants. Vera finally looked at him. You're anxious about her being here. I'm grateful she can be here, Ethan corrected. But yes, I'm worried about disrupting your work environment. You worry too much, Vera said. Bring her in here. I want to meet her properly. Ethan's heart rate spiked. Vera, that's not a request. He walked back to the library with mounting anxiety. Lily looked up from her drawing, immediately sensing his tension. Did I do something wrong? No, baby. Ms. Lang wants to meet you. Remember what we talked about. Be polite, be respectful, answer her questions if she asks any. Lily nodded solemnly and followed him to Vera's office, her hand small and warm in his. When they entered, Vera turned her wheelchair to face them, and Ethan watched his daughter take in the chair, the modified desk setup, the woman who controlled their financial survival. To his relief, Lily didn't stare or ask awkward questions. She simply looked at Vera with the open curiosity of childhood. Hello, Lily said. I'm Lily Cross. I'm 6 3/4. Thank you for letting me stay in your library. It's very beautiful. Vera's expression softened in a way Ethan had never seen. Hello, Lily. I'm Vera Lang. Your dad tells me you're an artist. I like to draw, Lily said carefully. Mostly butterflies and stories. What kind of stories? Lily brightened, sensing genuine interest. Stories about brave butterflies who go on adventures, and sometimes princesses, but the princesses solve their own problems instead of waiting for princes. Sounds like good stories, Vera said. Would you show me your drawings? Lily looked at Ethan for permission. He nodded, and she ran back to the library, returning moments later with her sketchbook. She approached Vera's wheelchair without hesitation, holding up the butterfly drawing. Vera studied it with real attention. These are monarch butterflies. Yes, I'm reading a book about them. Did you know they migrate thousands of miles? And they only live a few weeks, but they still do important things. I did know that, Vera said. I read about them when I was your age. I liked how something so small could be so determined. Lily beamed at finding a kindred spirit. That's my favorite part too. Even though they're fragile, they're really strong. Ethan watched the exchange with a feeling he couldn't quite name. Here was his daughter, talking about butterflies with a woman who'd built a tech empire. And somehow they'd found common ground in childhood fascination and metaphors about strength and fragility. Lily, Vera said, I have a computer in the library that's not being used. Would you like to learn some basic coding? I could teach you how to make simple animations. Lily's eyes went wide. Really? Really? If your dad says it's okay. Both of them looked at Ethan. He felt ambushed by kindness he hadn't expected and didn't know how to refuse. If it's not too much trouble, he managed. It's not, Vera said. She maneuvered her wheelchair toward the door. Come on, Lily, let's see if we can make those butterflies move. Ethan followed them to the library, watching Vera position herself in front of the computer with Lily standing beside her. Vera pulled up a simple coding program and began explaining concepts, loops, variables, commands, in language a 6-year-old could understand. See, we're telling the computer what to do, step by step, Vera explained. If we want the butterfly to move across the screen, we write instructions. Move right 10 spaces, move up 5 spaces. Like giving directions. Lily leaned in, fascinated. Can we make it change colors? Absolutely. Let me show you how. For the next hour, Ethan worked in his office while his daughter learned to code from a tech genius who'd somehow found patience he never knew she possessed. He could hear their voices occasionally, Lily's excited questions, Vera's measured explanations, both of them focused on making digital butterflies dance across a screen. At noon, Margaret appeared with lunch for all of them. Sandwiches, fruit, cookies that made Lily's face light up with joy. They ate together in the library, Vera asking Lily about school, about her favorite books, about what she wanted to be when she grew up. I want to be a scientist who studies butterflies, Lily announced. Or maybe an artist, or maybe both. You can be both, Vera said. Some of the best scientists are artists too. They see patterns others miss. After lunch, Vera returned to her office and Ethan to the Q4 reports. But something had shifted in the brownstone's atmosphere. It felt less like a workspace and more like something closer to a home. Lily worked on her coding project with fierce concentration, occasionally running to show Ethan her progress. Butterflies that moved, changed colors, left trails of light across the screen. At 4 o'clock, Vera called them both back to her office. Lily, she said seriously, you've been an excellent guest today. You were quiet when you needed to be, curious when it was appropriate, and you learned coding faster than most adults I've taught. I have something for you. She opened a drawer and pulled out a new sketchbook. Expensive, with heavy paper perfect for colored pencils or watercolors. Keep drawing your stories. They're important. Lily accepted the gift with the reverence of someone receiving treasure. Thank you, Ms. Lang. This is the best present ever. You're welcome, and Lily, you can come back anytime your dad needs to bring you to work. I enjoyed having you here. On the subway ride home, Lily wouldn't stop talking about her day, about coding butterflies, about Vera's computer setup, about the library's high ceilings and Margaret's cookies. I like your boss, Lily said. She's nice and she's really smart. She is, Ethan agreed, feeling that complicated knot in his chest tighten. You were very good today, baby girl. I'm proud of you. Daddy? Can I ask you something? Always. Why doesn't Ms. Lang have a family, like kids or a husband or someone? Ethan chose his words carefully. Some people's families look different. Sometimes people live alone because that's what works for them. Or sometimes they've had families that aren't around anymore. I don't know Ms. Lang's story, but I know she's very focused on her work. She seems lonely, Lily said with the blunt perception of children who see things adults try to hide. Like she has lots of stuff, but nobody to share it with. Ethan thought about Vera in her enormous brownstone, surrounded by adaptive equipment and expensive art, and the architecture of a life built around maximum independence. Lily wasn't wrong. For all her success, Vera existed in careful isolation. Her world narrowed to what she could control. Maybe, he said, but that's her choice to make, not ours to fix. I know, Lily said, but it would be nice if she had more people, like how you have me and I have you. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat in the dark thinking about family and isolation and the strange way their lives had become entangled with Vera's. He'd taken this job out of desperation, expecting nothing more than a paycheck and health insurance. Instead, he'd found something more complicated, a woman who was brilliant and difficult and unexpectedly kind, who'd taught his daughter to code and given her the best Christmas present she'd receive. He thought about Lily's observation that Vera seemed lonely despite her success. And he realized his daughter had seen what he'd been too focused on survival to notice. That beneath the demanding employer and fierce independence was someone who'd built walls so high she couldn't remember how to let people through them. It wasn't his job to fix that. It wasn't his place to care beyond professional obligations. But somewhere in the past months of managing red days and board battles and quiet conversations over cooling coffee, he'd started caring anyway. The new year arrived with snow that turned New York into something cleaner than it actually was, covering the grime in temporary beauty. Ethan had negotiated New Year's Day off, his first real holiday since starting with Vera, and spent it with Lily building a snowman in the small park near their apartment. She'd insisted on using buttons from one of his old shirts for the eyes, declaring that their snowman needed to look distinguished. When he returned to work on January 2nd, he found Vera in an unexpectedly good mood. She'd spent the holiday working, apparently, but seemed energized rather than depleted by it. I've been thinking about the expansion proposal we presented to the board, she said, as Ethan prepared her morning coffee. I want to actually pursue it, not as a defensive strategy, but as legitimate business development. That's ambitious, Ethan said, measuring coffee with his usual precision. European expansion requires significant capital investment and regulatory navigation, which is why I need someone to project manage it, someone who understands both strategic planning and operational execution. Vera turned her wheelchair to face him directly. I'm offering you a promotion, Director of Strategic Operations, $30,000 raise, expanded responsibilities, your own office. You'd still support me directly, but you'd also be building and managing the expansion initiative. Ethan felt the words hit him with physical force. $120,000 a year. The kind of salary that meant Lily could have new clothes without him calculating costs. That meant they could move to a better apartment. That meant he could stop living month to month in survival mode. I don't have the background for that title, he said carefully. I've been an assistant for 4 months. Promoting me to director level, you have an MBA from Columbia and 7 years at Blackstone, Vera interrupted. You've been doing director-level strategic work since your 2nd week here. I'm just making your title match your contributions. Her eyes held his. Unless you're not interested in the work itself? I'm interested, Ethan said, because he was. The prospect of building something from the ground up, of using the skills he'd thought were permanently shelved, made something in him come alive that had been dormant for 2 years. I'm just surprised. Why? You've proven yourself competent, reliable, and capable of high-level strategic thinking. Those qualities are rare enough that I'd be an idiot not to leverage them. Vera's expression turned shrewd. Plus, you're already invested in this company's success because your livelihood depends on it. That makes you trustworthy in ways hired guns never are. Brutal honesty, Ethan observed. It's what we do here. Vera pulled up a document on her screen. I've outlined the initial scope of work: European market analysis, regulatory compliance framework, potential partnership identification, go-to-market strategy development. You'd work closely with our legal team and finance department, but you'd own the project timeline and deliverables. Think you can handle it? Ethan scanned the scope. Comprehensive, challenging, exactly the kind of complex initiative he used to manage in his previous life. Yes, I can handle it. Good. Your new office is the room next to mine. Margaret's already had it set up. You start the new role Monday, which gives you the rest of this week to transition your current responsibilities to the temp assistant I'm hiring. Vera turned back to her monitors, already moving on to the next task. Don't make me regret investing in you. I won't, Ethan promised, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. That evening, he told Lily about the promotion while they ate dinner, pasta with the jarred sauce he could afford now without counting pennies. Does that mean we're rich? Lily asked, her eyes wide. It means we're stable, Ethan corrected. We can move to a better apartment. You can do activities like dance class or art lessons if you want. We don't have to worry about running out of money anymore. Lily was quiet for a moment, pushing pasta around her plate. Does it mean you'll have to work more? Like when Mommy was sick and you were always at the hospital? The question gutted him. He set down his fork and pulled her chair closer to his. No, baby, this job has normal hours. I'll still be home for dinner most nights. I'll still put you to bed. The promotion just means I get to do more interesting work, and we get paid more for it. Promise? I promise. He kissed the top of her head. You and me, we're a team. Nothing changes that. Bam. Maidan. But things did change, in ways both obvious and subtle. Ethan moved into his new office, smaller than Vera's but still impressive, with a window overlooking Gramercy Park and a desk that didn't wobble. He hired a temp assistant named Marcus to handle Vera's day-to-day needs, though Ethan still managed her personal schedule and attended critical meetings. The European expansion project consumed his days with the kind of intellectual challenge he'd been starving for, and he felt parts of himself reawakening that he'd thought were permanently dormant. He also spent more time with Vera in contexts beyond assistant duties. They had working lunches where they debated market positioning strategies. They stayed late together analyzing competitive threats and identifying opportunities. They had conversations that veered from business into philosophy, from strategy into personal history, though Vera always redirected when things got too intimate. Ethan learned things about her in these conversations. Fragments she'd drop casually, then immediately move past. She'd grown up wealthy but emotionally neglected, raised by parents who valued achievement over connection. She'd built her company in her 20s, driven by a need to prove she was more than her family's money. She'd been engaged once, years before the accident, to another tech entrepreneur who'd left when she'd chosen her company over starting a family with him. He wanted me to step back from leadership, focus on being a wife and eventually a mother, Vera said one evening as they reviewed partnership proposals. Said I was too ambitious, that it wasn't attractive. I told him to find someone less ambitious then. Sounds like you dodged a bullet, Ethan said, or confirmed every fear I had about relationships requiring you to make yourself smaller. Vera's voice was matter-of-fact, but Ethan heard the old wound beneath it. After that, I focused exclusively on building the company. Easier to invest in something that couldn't ask me to be less than I was. Until the accident, Ethan said quietly. Vera's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Until the accident, which proved that no matter how much you build, your body can still betray everything you've worked for. Your body didn't betray your mind, Ethan pointed out. You're still the same person who built this company. You just navigate the world differently now. That's a diplomatic way of saying I'm trapped in a chair that costs more than most people's cars. There was bitterness in her voice, the kind that came from grief that never quite healed. Ethan chose his next words carefully. My wife spent her last 6 months unable to walk, barely able to speak coherently, her body shutting down in increments while her mind stayed sharp enough to know exactly what was happening. I watched her lose everything except her awareness of the loss. That's betrayal, knowing you're disappearing and being powerless to stop it. What you're living with isn't betrayal. It's adaptation. Vera looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. That must have been unbearable. It was, but it also taught me that bodies are just vehicles. Emily was still Emily until the very end, even when the vehicle stopped working. You're still you, Vera. The chair is just transportation. You make it sound simple, Vera said, her voice softer than usual. It's not simple, it's just true. They fell into silence after that, but it was the comfortable kind. The silence of people who'd said something that mattered and didn't need to fill the space with more words. February brought another red day, worse than the ones before. Ethan arrived to find Margaret waiting with a grim expression. She's been up since 2 a.m. Migraine started around midnight, escalated into full autonomic dysreflexia. I had to call her neurologist at 4. She's finally stable, but she's in agony, and she has a presentation to the board this afternoon that she refuses to reschedule. Can she even sit upright? Ethan asked. Barely, but you know Vera, she'd rather die than show weakness to Collins. Ethan found Vera in her bedroom, still in bed with blackout curtains drawn and an ice pack positioned at the base of her skull. Her face was drawn with pain, her breathing careful and controlled. I know, she said before he could speak. I look like death. Say what you need to say and get out. The light from the hallway is killing me. I'm rescheduling the board presentation, Ethan said. No. Yes, you can barely lift your head. Trying to present in this condition makes me look weak, Vera finished, which is exactly what Collins wants. Any sign of vulnerability and he'll push for another leadership review. Then I'll present on your behalf, Ethan said. I know the material inside and out. I've been managing this project for 2 months. The board knows me from the last meeting. I'll handle it. Vera tried to shake her head, then winced at the movement. They'll see it as me hiding behind you. They'll see it as you having built a competent team that can execute when needed. That's good leadership, not weakness. Ethan kept his voice calm, factual. You can review my presentation deck remotely if you want, but you're not getting out of this bed today. For once, Vera didn't argue. The pain was too overwhelming for her usual stubbornness. If you screw this up, I'm demoting you back to assistant and cutting your salary in half. Fair enough, Ethan said. He left her in darkness and spent the next 4 hours preparing to present their quarterly results and expansion progress to a board that would be looking for any excuse to question Vera's leadership. The presentation happened at 2 p.m. Ethan appeared on camera alone, which immediately prompted questions from Collins. Where's Vera? Is she too ill to present? Ms. Lang is managing a migraine today, Ethan said calmly. Since I've been leading the European Expansion Initiative, she delegated today's presentation to me. She's available by text if you have questions requiring her direct input. He pulled up the first slide before Collins could respond. Let's review Q1 progress and strategic positioning. He walked them through the data with the same precision he'd learned at Blackstone. Clear narrative, undeniable metrics, strategic insights that demonstrated forward momentum. He addressed concerns before they were raised, provided context for setbacks, highlighted wins without overstating them. When Collins tried to suggest the European expansion was over budget, Ethan demolished the argument with comparative market analysis, showing their spending was actually conservative relative to competitors. By the end of the presentation, even Collins seemed grudgingly impressed. Patricia, the board chair, smiled. Excellent work, Mr. Cross. It's clear Vera has built a strong leadership team. Please convey our appreciation to her and our hopes for her quick recovery. I will, Ethan said. Thank you for your time. When he returned to Vera's bedroom to report success, he found her sitting upright with her laptop balanced on her knees, the migraine finally releasing its grip enough for her to function. I watched the whole thing, she said. You were perfect. Professional, confident, competent. Collins hated every minute of it. Good, Ethan said, feeling a surge of satisfaction. That was the goal. Vera looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You could run this company without me. You know that, right? You have the skills, the strategic vision, the ability to manage stakeholders. You don't need to be my second in command. I'm not interested in running a company, Ethan said honestly. I'm interested in building something meaningful while having time for my daughter. This role gives me both. Running a company would consume everything. You know that better than anyone. Fair point. Vera closed her laptop. Thank you for today, for handling the presentation, for not making me feel weak for needing help. You're not weak, Ethan said firmly. You're human. There's a difference. Something flickered across Vera's face. Gratitude mixed with something deeper, something that made Ethan's pulse quicken in a way that felt dangerous. He'd learned to read her expressions over the past months, had become attuned to the subtle shifts in her mood and physical state. But this expression was new, and it made him acutely aware that they were alone in her bedroom, that the professional boundaries between them had been slowly eroding, that somewhere along the way his feelings had become more complicated than simple employee loyalty. He stepped back from the bed, creating physical distance. You should rest. I'll handle everything for the remainder of the day. Ethan, Vera said, and her voice carried a note he'd never heard before. Uncertainty, maybe, or the beginning of something she wasn't ready to name. Stay for a minute. I want to ask you something. He stayed, though every instinct told him this was a conversation that could change things in ways neither of them were prepared for. Why did you really take this job? Vera asked. I know you were desperate. I know you needed money. But you could have taken something easier, less demanding. Working for me, it requires more than just competence. It requires tolerance for difficulty, for emotional complexity, for witnessing things most people would find uncomfortable. Why choose this? Ethan considered lying, offering the safe answer about opportunity and challenge. Instead, he told the truth. Because you reminded me of Emily in those final months. Not physically, your situations are completely different, but the way you fight to maintain dignity while your body tries to steal it from you, the way you refuse to let people pity you, the way you demand to be treated as competent even when you need help. He met her eyes. I couldn't save Emily. I couldn't fix what was breaking in her body. But I could show up every day and treat her like she was still herself, not just a tragedy happening in slow motion. I can do the same for you. That felt meaningful. Vera was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I'm not your wife's replacement. I can't be the second chance that makes her death mean something. I know that, Ethan said. That's not what this is. Then what is it? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them had acknowledged until now. Ethan felt the ground shifting beneath him, the careful professional relationship they'd built beginning to crack open into something else. It's two people who understand survival, he said finally, who know what it costs to keep going when everything tells you to quit, who've learned to carry weight they never asked for. He paused. It's working together. That's all it needs to be. Right, Vera said, but her voice suggested she knew he was lying as much as he did. Working together. Ethan left before the conversation could go further, before he could say things that would complicate an arrangement that was finally giving him stability. He spent the rest of the afternoon in his office, trying to focus on market analyses and partnership proposals, trying not to think about the way Vera had looked at him or the way his heart had accelerated when she'd asked him to stay. That evening, Lily noticed his distraction over dinner. You're quiet, Daddy. Did something bad happen at work? No, baby. Work was good. I'm just thinking about a project. Is it a hard project? Very hard, Ethan said, which was true even if he wasn't talking about European expansion anymore. But I'll figure it out. You always do, Lily said with absolute faith. Because you're smart and you don't give up. Ethan wished he felt as confident as his daughter sounded. The weeks that followed were both easier and harder. Easier because they fell back into professional routine, focusing on work deliverables and strategic planning without acknowledging the conversation in Vera's bedroom. Harder because Ethan was now acutely aware of every moment they spent alone together, every casual touch when he helped her with transfers, every shared look across meeting tables when someone said something particularly stupid. He told himself it was just proximity, just the natural result of spending 60 hours a week with someone. He told himself Vera was his employer and nothing more, that any feelings beyond professional respect were inappropriate and unwelcome. He told himself he was still grieving Emily, that 2 years wasn't enough time to move on, that getting involved with his boss would be a catastrophic mistake that could destroy the stability he'd fought so hard to build. He told himself a lot of things, and believed none of them. In March, Vera's neurologist recommended a new treatment protocol, experimental, with uncertain outcomes but potential for improved mobility. It required intensive therapy sessions 3 times a week, plus daily exercises that would be exhausting and painful. The doctor says there's maybe a 20% chance of meaningful improvement, Vera told Ethan after the consultation. They were in her office reviewing partnership contracts, and she delivered the news with the same flat effect she used for routine business updates. Meaningful being defined as potential return of some voluntary leg movement, not walking, just movement. 20% chance of barely measurable progress in exchange for 3 months of agony and time I don't have. Are you going to try it? Ethan asked. I don't know. Vera's hands were still on her wheelchair's armrests, her gaze fixed on her monitors. The rational calculation says no. Time investment versus probability of success, it's a terrible bet. I should focus on what I can control. The company, the expansion, maintaining what functionality I still have. That's the rational calculation, Ethan agreed. What does the irrational part of you want? Vera finally looked at him, and he saw something raw in her expression. Hope she was afraid to acknowledge, want she'd learned to suppress, the desperate human desire to believe that maybe, against all odds, things could get better. The irrational part wants to try, she admitted quietly, even though trying means hoping, and hoping means risking disappointment that I'm not sure I can survive anymore. You've survived worse, Ethan said. Have I? Or have I just learned to exist in a diminished state and call it survival? Her voice carried an edge of bitterness. There's a difference between living and just not dying. Ethan thought about his own past 2 years, the months of just getting through each day, of telling himself that feeding Lily and keeping a roof over their heads counted as success, of letting everything else atrophy in service of basic survival. He knew exactly what Vera meant. You're right, he said. There is a difference. But trying this treatment, that's choosing to live, not just survive. That's betting on the possibility that things could be better, even if the odds are terrible. And if it doesn't work, if I spend 3 months in pain and exhaustion for nothing, then you'll know you tried. That has value even if the outcome doesn't match the hope. Ethan held her gaze. But Vera, you have to try because you want to, not because you think you should or because other people expect it. This decision has to be yours. Vera was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against her armrest in the way they did when she was processing complex problems. I'll think about it, she said finally. Right now I need you to review the German partnership proposal and tell me if their intellectual property protections are adequate. She'd closed the door on personal conversation, retreating back into business. Ethan followed her lead, pulling up the proposal and analyzing contract language, letting the work create distance from emotions that were becoming increasingly difficult to manage. 2 days later, Vera made her decision. I'm starting the treatment protocol next week, she announced during their morning meeting. It's going to affect my energy levels and focus, so I need you to take on more of the day-to-day leadership decisions. Weekly board updates, vendor negotiations, partner communications. You'll handle all of it with my oversight, but not my direct involvement. Think you can manage? Yes, Ethan said, feeling both pride at her trust and anxiety about the added responsibility. Good. Vera pulled up a treatment schedule on her screen. Physical therapy is Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 2 p.m. I'll be useless for work after those sessions. Pain levels will be high, cognitive function will be compromised. Schedule around it. The first treatment session happened the following Monday. Ethan cleared Vera's afternoon schedule and arranged for her medical transport. When she returned at 4:30, her face was gray with exhaustion and barely controlled pain. Marcus helped her transfer from the transport chair back to her regular wheelchair, while Ethan watched with clenched fists, wanting to help but knowing Vera needed to maintain whatever independence she could. "How was it?" he asked once Marcus had left them alone. "Excruciating," Vera said flatly. "The therapist kept saying you're doing great, like I was a child learning to tie my shoes. She made me attempt movements I haven't been able to do since the accident, pushing muscles that have atrophied, activating neural pathways that are mostly scar tissue. I accomplished nothing except confirming that my body is broken." "You accomplished showing up," Ethan said. That's not nothing." "It feels like nothing." Vera's voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through her usual control. "Do you know what it's like to try with everything you have and watch your body refuse to respond? To send signals that go nowhere, to feel nothing where sensation used to be? It's not inspiring. It's not brave. It's just failure happening in slow motion." Ethan crouched beside her wheelchair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Emily used to say something similar, that trying and failing felt worse than not trying at all, because at least not trying preserved the illusion that maybe success was possible. She hated physical therapy for exactly the reason you're describing. Every session was evidence of loss." "What did you tell her?" Vera asked. "I told her that showing up counted, that trying mattered even when it didn't work, that I saw her courage even when she couldn't feel it herself." He held Vera's gaze. "I'm telling you the same thing. You showed up today knowing it would hurt, knowing success was unlikely. That takes more strength than most people will ever need to have." "You're romanticizing suffering," Vera said, but her voice had lost its bitter edge. "I'm acknowledging reality. Pain is pain. There's nothing romantic about it. But choosing to pursue possibility despite pain, that's worth something. That's how you know you're living instead of just surviving." Vera was quiet for a moment, then reached out with trembling fingers and briefly touched his hand where it rested on her wheelchair's armrest. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds before she pulled back, but it left Ethan's skin tingling with awareness. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for understanding the difference." The treatment sessions continued every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, each one leaving Vera depleted and hurting. Ethan learned to manage the aftermath, adjusting her schedule to accommodate her reduced functionality, handling communication she couldn't focus on, being present without hovering, knowing when she needed space and when she needed company. He also watched for signs of progress, though Vera had forbidden anyone to ask about results. 3 weeks in, he noticed her right hand had slightly more flexibility during morning coffee preparation. 5 weeks in, he saw her shift her weight almost imperceptibly while positioned at her desk. 7 weeks in, during a video call with investors, he caught her moving her foot, just a tiny flex of her toes, probably unconscious, but definitely voluntary movement that hadn't existed before. He didn't mention any of it, knowing Vera would hate the attention or the pressure of expectation. But he noticed, and he felt hope kindling despite his attempts to remain professionally detached. In late April, everything changed. Ethan arrived at the brownstone to find Margaret in tears, actual tears, which terrified him because Margaret never cried. "What happened? Is Vera—" "She's fine," Margaret said quickly. "Better than fine. Come see." She led him to the home gym where Vera's physical therapy sessions happened. Ethan entered to find Vera positioned between parallel bars, her therapist on one side and medical equipment on the other. And Vera was standing, not fully weight-bearing, not independently. She was supported by the bars and clearly struggling. But she was upright, her legs taking some of her body weight, her face set with fierce concentration as she focused everything she had on the simple act of remaining vertical. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest, joy and fear and pride, and a dozen other emotions he couldn't name. He wanted to cheer, wanted to rush forward, wanted to do anything except stand frozen in the doorway, watching this impossibly difficult, impossibly important moment. Vera's therapist counted softly. "That's 15 seconds. Excellent work, Vera. Ready to sit?" 20, Vera gritted out. "I can do 20. She held for 5 more seconds that looked like they cost her everything, then let the therapist guide her back into her wheelchair. Only then did she notice Ethan in the doorway. Their eyes met across the room, and Ethan saw tears on her face, silent, streaming, unstoppable. Not tears of pain or frustration, but something else entirely. Hope realized. Possibility glimpsed, the fragile, terrifying joy of progress after months of believing progress was impossible. I stood, Vera said, her voice breaking. 20 seconds, but I stood. You did, Ethan said, because he didn't trust himself to say anything more without his own voice breaking. The therapist smiled gently. This is excellent progress. We'll build from here. Longer durations, more weight bearing, eventually attempting steps with support. But 20 seconds of standing after 3 months of nerve damage is remarkable. After the therapist left, Ethan found Vera still in the gym, sitting in her wheelchair with her head in her hands. He approached carefully, not sure if she wanted comfort or solitude. 20 seconds, she said without looking up. 20 seconds of standing, and I'm crying like it's a miracle. When I used to run marathons, when I used to dance, when I used to exist in my body without thinking about it. 20 seconds is a miracle when the alternative was never standing again, Ethan said quietly. You're allowed to celebrate progress even when it's smaller than what you lost. Vera finally looked up at him, her face wet with tears she hadn't bothered to wipe away. I didn't think it would work. I spent 3 months in agony telling myself it was pointless, that I was deluding myself with false hope. And now it's working, and I don't know how to feel except terrified that it'll stop, that this is as good as it gets, that I've been given just enough progress to remember what I'm missing. Ethan sat on the bench beside her wheelchair, close enough to offer comfort without crowding her space. Then feel terrified. Feel all of it, the hope and the fear and the grief for what you lost and the fragile joy of what you're gaining. You don't have to choose one emotion. You're allowed to feel everything at once. That's exhausting, Vera said, but she was almost smiling through her tears. Most worthwhile things are, Ethan agreed. They sat together in the gym, spring sunlight filtering through the windows, the parallel bars standing like monuments to possibility. And Ethan felt the boundaries he'd been so carefully maintaining begin to dissolve entirely, felt himself crossing from employee into something else, witness to Vera's vulnerability, keeper of her hopes, someone who cared too much to pretend this was just professional anymore. Ethan, Vera said, her voice barely above a whisper, I need you to know something. His heart hammered against his ribs. What? She turned her wheelchair to face him directly, her dark eyes holding his with an intensity that made breathing difficult. The past few months, working with you, having you see me at my worst and not flinch, it's changed something for me, made me feel less alone, less trapped in this diminished version of myself. She paused, clearly struggling with words that didn't come naturally. I'm falling in love with you. I know that's complicated and probably inappropriate given our work relationship, but you deserve to know the truth. The world seemed to stop, every sound muted except the pounding of Ethan's pulse in his ears. Vera Lang, brilliant, difficult, fiercely independent Vera, had just confessed feelings he'd been trying desperately not to acknowledge in himself. Vera, he started, not sure what he was about to say. You don't have to respond, she cut him off quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know because carrying it alone was becoming impossible. And I understand if this makes things awkward. If you need to... I'm falling in love with you too, Ethan said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I've been trying not to, trying to keep everything professional, trying to pretend what I feel is just respect or loyalty or gratitude. But it's not. It's love. And it terrifies me. Vera stared at him, vulnerability and hope warring in her expression. Why does it terrify you? Because you're my employer. Because the power dynamic is complicated. Because I need this job to survive, and mixing personal feelings with professional necessity feels dangerous. He took a breath. And because loving someone who's in a wheelchair, who needs assistance with basic functions, who has bad days where pain makes her cruel, it reminds me of loving Emily and watching her die. I'm afraid of carrying that deeply again and having it end in loss. I'm not dying, Vera said firmly. My condition is stable. This isn't the same situation. I know that intellectually, but fear isn't intellectual. Ethan held her gaze. And there's still the power imbalance. You control my income, my health insurance, my daughter's stability. If this goes wrong, then we make it not go wrong, Vera said, or we acknowledge that some risks are worth taking even when the stakes are high. She wheeled closer to him, closing the distance between them. I'm not asking you to quit your job or change our work arrangement. I'm asking if you're willing to explore what this could be, carefully, honestly, acknowledging all the complications. Ethan thought about Lily, about the stability he'd finally built, about all the rational reasons to say no. Then he thought about the way Vera had taught his daughter to code, the way she'd trusted him to defend her company, the way she'd stood for 20 seconds today on legs that weren't supposed to work and let him witness the terrified joy of impossible progress. I'm willing, he said, carefully, honestly, with full awareness that this could be a terrible idea. Most of my best decisions started as terrible ideas, Vera said, and then she was reaching for his hand, her fingers trembling slightly as they interlaced with his. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, the careful walls he'd built around his heart beginning to crack open, letting in light and possibility and the terrifying prospect of loving someone again, despite knowing exactly how much it could cost. We should probably talk about boundaries, he said, about how to manage this at work, about what we tell people, about... Vera leaned forward and kissed him. It was awkward given the angle, given the wheelchair between them, given the fact that neither of them had done this in years. But it was also perfect, gentle and tentative and full of the fragile hope of two people who'd both learned that happiness was never guaranteed, but sometimes, rarely, it was still possible. When they pulled apart, Ethan saw tears on Vera's face again. Happy ones this time. We'll figure out the details, she said. Right now, I just want to sit here with you and feel grateful that I stood today, that I told the truth, that you didn't run when I gave you every reason to. So they sat together as afternoon sunlight stretched across the gym floor, holding hands like teenagers, both of them terrified and hopeful and falling into something that would change everything. They kept their relationship private for the first month, navigating the delicate balance between professional and personal with the caution of people who understood exactly how much they stood to lose. At work, they maintained the same dynamic they'd always had. Ethan managing strategic operations, Vera leading the company, both of them focused and professional. But in the quiet moments between meetings, when Margaret had gone home and Marcus had left for the day, they allowed themselves to be something more. Vera's therapy continued showing progress. By mid-May, she could stand for nearly 2 minutes with minimal support. By early June, she was taking assisted steps between the parallel bars, halting, uncertain steps that required every ounce of concentration she possessed, but steps nonetheless. Each small victory felt monumental, and Ethan was there to witness all of them, learning the difference between celebrating her progress and making her feel like an inspiration story. Don't look at me like that, Vera said one evening after a particularly grueling therapy session. She was exhausted, her face drawn with the kind of pain that made her sharp-edged and defensive. Like I'm some kind of miracle. I'm just doing physical therapy. It's not heroic. I'm not looking at you like you're a miracle, Ethan said calmly. He'd learned to weather her moods, to recognize when pain made her lash out, and when she genuinely needed him to back off. I'm looking at you like you're someone I care about, who's working incredibly hard at something difficult. There's a difference. It feels the same from where I'm sitting, Vera muttered, but her defensiveness softened slightly. Sorry, I'm exhausted and everything hurts and I took it out on you. I know. Ethan brought her the ice pack she kept in the gym freezer, positioned it where her therapist had shown him. You don't have to apologize for being human. I'm not good at being human, Vera said, accepting the ice with a grimace. I'm good at being competent. Being vulnerable feels like failure. Then we're both failing together, Ethan said, sitting beside her wheelchair, because I'm terrified every day that I'm going to mess this up, that I'll cross some line at work that compromises your authority or mine, that Lily will get attached to you and then something will go wrong and she'll lose another important person, that I'm being selfish wanting this when the rational choice would be to keep everything professional. Vera reached for his hand, her grip stronger than it had been months ago. We're both being selfish. That's allowed. Survival doesn't have to mean denying yourself everything good. When did you become wise? Ethan asked, managing a smile. I've always been wise. You're just now noticing because you're emotionally invested. Vera squeezed his hand. I want to meet Lily properly, not as your boss who lets her visit occasionally, but as someone who's important to you. Is that okay? Ethan felt his chest tighten with a complicated mix of joy and anxiety. She already likes you, talks about you constantly, about the coding lessons, about your smart computer setup. But meeting you as someone I'm dating, that's different. That's making this real in a way that affects her. I know, Vera said. That's why I'm asking permission instead of just suggesting it. This is your call, Ethan. I'll follow your lead on anything involving your daughter. He thought about Lily's questions over the past weeks, why he smiled more lately, why he sometimes came home later with that particular glow people got when they were happy, instead of just surviving. She was 6, but she wasn't oblivious. She'd figure it out eventually, anyway. Okay, he said, but we do it slowly. Casual dinners here where she can see us together. Let her adjust gradually instead of making a big announcement. Slow and gradual, Vera agreed. I can do that. The first dinner happened on a Saturday evening in mid-June. Ethan brought Lily to the brownstone with a carefully prepared explanation that Ms. Lang had invited them both for dinner as a thank you for all his hard work. Lily accepted this at face value, bouncing into the brownstone with her usual enthusiasm, clutching a new drawing she'd made specifically for Vera, butterflies arranged in a heart shape. I made this for you, Lily announced, presenting the drawing with the gravity of someone offering a priceless gift. Because Daddy says you like butterflies too, and hearts mean you care about someone. Vera accepted the drawing with visible emotion, studying it carefully. This is beautiful, Lily. Thank you. I'm going to put it in my office where I can see it every day. Really? Lily's face lit up. Daddy puts my drawings on the fridge, but your office is fancier than our fridge. Much fancier, Vera agreed, her eyes meeting Ethan's over Lily's head with a warmth that made his heart skip. Come on, let's show you what Margaret made for dinner. Do you like lasagna? They ate in Vera's dining room, which had been modified with a table height that accommodated her wheelchair. Margaret had outdone herself with homemade lasagna, fresh bread, and a salad Lily actually ate without complaint. Conversation flowed easily, Lily telling Vera about school, about her friends, about the chapter book she was reading, Vera asking questions that showed genuine interest, not the patronizing way some adults talk to children. Daddy says you're really smart, and you built a whole company, Lily said between bites of lasagna. What does your company do? We build technology that protects people's privacy, Vera explained. You know how when you use the internet, sometimes companies want to collect information about you? What you like, where you go, what you buy. My company makes tools that keep that information safe, so only you control it. Like a secret keeper, Lily said, her eyes wide. That's important. Daddy says everybody deserves secrets. Your dad is right, Vera said, smiling at Ethan. Everybody deserves privacy, even 6-year-olds. Especially 6-year-olds, Lily said seriously, because sometimes we have secret thoughts we're not ready to share yet. After dinner, Vera offered to show Lily the progress she'd made on the coding project they'd started months ago. They went to the library together, Lily chattering happily while Vera navigated her wheelchair with the practiced ease of someone who'd long ago mastered her environment. Ethan watched them go, feeling that complicated knot in his chest tighten further. Joy at seeing two people he cared about connecting naturally. Fear at how much it would hurt if this all fell apart. Margaret appeared beside him with coffee, her expression knowing. You're in love with her. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't bother denying it. Is it that obvious? To someone who's known her for 20 years? Yes. Margaret set down the coffee mug. She's different with you, softer, more willing to be vulnerable. I haven't seen her this happy since before the accident. What if I mess this up? Ethan asked quietly. What if the power dynamic becomes a problem? Or what if Lily gets hurt? Or what if you spend so much time worrying about worst-case scenarios that you miss the good thing happening right now? Margaret interrupted gently. Life doesn't come with guarantees, mijo. You know that better than most. But Vera cares about you and your daughter. That's worth something, even if it's scary. From the library, Ethan could hear Lily's delighted laughter and Vera's patient explanations. He picked up his coffee and walked toward the sound, finding them bent over the computer together, Lily's small fingers on the mouse as she guided a digital butterfly across the screen. Look, Daddy, Lily called when she noticed him. I made it change colors when it touches the flowers. That's incredible, baby girl. Ethan watched Vera's face as she watched Lily, The genuine affection there, the careful way she guided without hovering, the patience she showed that she rarely extended to adults. They stayed until Lily started yawning, her energy finally depleted. Vera gave her the butterfly drawing to take home, promising they'd work on more coding projects soon. At the door, Lily surprised them both by hugging Vera carefully, mindful of the wheelchair but not hesitant. "Thank you for dinner," Lily said, "and for teaching me computer stuff. You're really nice." "Thank you for coming," Vera said, her voice slightly thick. "You're welcome here anytime." On the subway ride home, Lily was quieter than usual, processing something. Finally, she looked up at Ethan with those two perceptive eyes. "Daddy, do you like Ms. Lang? Like, more than just for work?" Ethan's heart hammered. They'd agreed to go slowly, but apparently Lily was faster at reading situations than they'd anticipated. "What makes you ask that?" "You smile different when you look at her, like how you used to smile at Mommy in the pictures." Lily's voice was careful, testing how much truth she was allowed. "And she looks at you the same way, like you're important." Ethan took a breath, choosing honesty over evasion. "You're right. I do like her. More than just for work. We've been spending time together, getting to know each other better. How do you feel about that?" Lily was quiet for a long moment, her small hand gripping his tighter. "Is she going to be my new mom?" "Whoa, slow down," Ethan said gently. "We're still figuring things out. Even if Vera and I keep seeing each other, that doesn't automatically make her your mom. Your mom will always be your mom. Nobody can replace her. But Vera could be someone else important in your life, if you're okay with that." "Would we live with her?" Lily asked. "In that big house?" "I don't know, baby. We haven't talked about that. Right now we're just spending time together and seeing if we make each other happy. Is that okay with you?" Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone whose opinion actually mattered. "I think it's okay. I like her. She's nice to me, and she's nice to you, and she doesn't treat me like I'm stupid, even though I'm just a kid." She paused. "But Daddy, if she makes you sad, we don't have to stay, right? We can leave and be just us again?" Ethan's throat tightened at his daughter's protectiveness, at the way she was already thinking about exit strategies because she'd learned too young that good things could end without warning. "Right. We always have that choice. You and me, we're a team first. Nothing changes that." "Okay," Lily said, satisfied. Then, with the emotional pivot of childhood, "Can we get ice cream tomorrow? I was really good at dinner." "You were perfect at dinner," Ethan agreed. "We'll get ice cream." He texted Vera later that night after Lily was asleep. "She knows. Asked if I like you more than just for work. I told her yes." Vera's response came quickly. How did she react? "She's okay with it, cautiously supportive, asked if you were going to be her new mom and if we were moving in together." There was a longer pause before Vera's next message. "Those are reasonable questions I don't have answers to yet. Does that bother you?" "Not bothering me," Ethan typed back. "Just making it real. This isn't just about us anymore. It never was," Vera replied. "You've been a package deal from day one. I knew that when I let myself fall for you." Ethan stared at those words, "Let myself fall for you," and felt something warm spread through his chest despite all the rational reasons to be cautious. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Me too," Vera wrote. "But I'm less scared with you than I've been of anything else in my life. That has to mean something." "It means everything," Ethan thought, but didn't type. Instead, he wrote, "See you Monday." And then, after a moment's hesitation, "I love you." The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I love you too. Sleep well." The next few weeks were a careful dance of integration. Lily visited the brownstone more frequently, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for an hour after school when Ethan needed to finish work. Vera taught her more coding, showed her how to navigate digital art programs, talked to her about science and butterflies and the way technology could solve problems. They developed their own relationship independent of Ethan, something that thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. At work, Ethan and Vera maintained professionalism, though Margaret and Marcus had clearly figured out something had shifted between them. Marcus was carefully neutral, never commenting but occasionally shooting Ethan looks that suggested he knew exactly what was happening. Margaret was more direct. "You're good for her," she told Ethan one morning while Vera was in therapy. I was worried after the accident that she'd close herself off permanently, that she'd decide people weren't worth the vulnerability. But you've reminded her how to be human instead of just competent. She reminds me of the same thing, Ethan said honestly. We're good for each other. Then don't mess it up by overthinking, Margaret advised. I've watched you both calculate risk and analyze worst-case scenarios. Sometimes you just have to jump and trust you'll figure out the landing. The jump came sooner than Ethan expected. In early July, Vera's therapy reached a breakthrough. She'd been working toward unsupported standing for weeks. No parallel bars, no hands on walls, just her own legs holding her body weight. On a Wednesday afternoon, with Ethan watching from the gym doorway, she did it. Her therapist positioned her carefully, hands hovering nearby but not touching. Vera took a breath, set her jaw with that fierce concentration he knew so well, and pushed herself upright. For 3 seconds, then 5, then 10. She stood alone. Her legs trembled with effort, her arms extended for balance, her entire body focused on the impossible task of remaining vertical without support. That's 15 seconds, her therapist said softly. Excellent, Vera. You can sit 20, Vera ground out. I can do 20. She held for 5 more seconds that looked like they cost her every ounce of strength, then let the therapist guide her back into the wheelchair. When she looked up, there were tears streaming down her face. I stood alone, she said, her voice breaking. No bars, no support. I stood. Ethan crossed the room and knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her trembling hands in his. You did. That was incredible. It's not enough, Vera said through her tears. 20 seconds of standing and I'm crying like I've climbed Everest. When normal people stand for hours without thinking about it, when standing used to be so automatic I never noticed doing it. Stop, Ethan said firmly. Stop comparing yourself to what you were or what other people can do. You stood alone today. That's a victory. You're allowed to celebrate it without qualifying it with everything it isn't. Vera's therapist nodded. He's right. This is tremendous progress, Vera. Most people with your level of injury never regain independent standing. This opens possibilities we weren't sure existed. What possibilities? Vera asked, wiping her eyes. Walking. With assistance at first, maybe with mobility aids long term. But walking. The therapist smiled. It's going to take time and continued hard work, but I think we can get you there. After the therapist left, Ethan stayed with Vera in the gym while she processed. She was quiet, staring at the parallel bars that had been her world for months, clearly trying to wrap her mind around the idea that they might not always be necessary. If I can walk, she said slowly, even with assistance, that changes everything. How I move through the world, how people see me, what I'm capable of. You're already capable of everything that matters, Ethan interrupted. Walking doesn't make you more valuable or competent. It just makes you mobile in a different way. I know that intellectually, Vera said, but emotionally. Ethan, I've built my identity for 2 years around being in this chair, around proving I could be successful despite it. If I walk again, who am I? The same person, Ethan said simply, just with different transportation options. Vera laughed through her remaining tears. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. It's also complicated and terrifying and full of impossible feelings. Both things can be true. He squeezed her hands gently. But whatever happens, whether you walk next month or next year or never, I'm here. That doesn't change. How do you always know the right thing to say? Vera asked. I don't. I just say what I'd want to hear if I were terrified and hoping and grieving all at once. Ethan stood, then bent to kiss her forehead. Come on. Margaret made dinner and Lily is coming over after her art class. We should celebrate your victory with people who love you. The word hung in the air between them. Love. Acknowledged, but still fragile, still something they were both learning to trust. Vera nodded and they went to dinner together. Lily's reaction to the standing news was pure joy. Does this mean you can play tag with me someday? She asked Vera with the hopeful enthusiasm of childhood. Maybe someday, Vera said, smiling at her. I'll probably never be very good at tag, but I might be able to walk with you in the park, if you're patient with me going slowly. I'm very patient, Lily said seriously. Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm the most patient kid she knows because I help her with her English, and I don't get frustrated when she forgets words. Then we'll make a good team, Vera said. After dinner, while Lily was absorbed in a coding project, Vera turned to Ethan with an expression that suggested she'd been planning this conversation. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond. Ethan's stomach tightened with instinctive anxiety. Okay. I want you and Lily to move in here, Vera said in a rush, as if getting the words out quickly would make them easier. Not immediately, not until you're ready, but I want you to consider it seriously. You're paying rent on a studio apartment that's too small for two people. Lily deserves space to grow, a bedroom of her own, stability that doesn't depend on month-to-month lease renewals. And selfishly, I want you here. I want to wake up knowing you're nearby. I want Lily's drawings on my refrigerator and her chaos in my too-quiet house. I want us to be a family, even if that's unconventional, and we're still figuring out what it means. Ethan felt the words hit him with physical force. Moving in together, it was enormous, terrifying, everything he'd been too cautious to even imagine. Vera, that's a huge step. We've only been together a few months. I know, Vera interrupted. I know it's fast, and I know all the rational arguments against it. Power dynamics, rushing things. What happens if it doesn't work out? But I also know that I'm 41 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life being careful and rational and protecting myself from risk. And where did that get me? Alone in a wheelchair in a house too big for one person. She held his gaze. I don't want to be careful anymore. I want to choose the people I love and build something with them. I want to choose you and Lily. What about the practical concerns? Ethan asked, his mind racing. My job? The power dynamic? What happens if we break up? Then we handle it like adults, Vera said firmly. I'll draw up an agreement that protects both of us. You'll have a separate contract as my director of strategic operations that's independent of our personal relationship. If things end, you keep your job and your salary, and we figure out living arrangements that work for Lily. I'm not asking you to give up your security. I'm asking you to let me be part of building it. Ethan looked across the room to where Lily was hunched over the computer, her tongue between her teeth in concentration, completely absorbed in making digital butterflies dance. He thought about their studio apartment with its spotty heat and the water damage on the ceiling that the landlord kept promising to fix. He thought about Lily sharing his bedroom, about the lack of space for her to spread out and play and just be a kid. Then he thought about this brownstone with its empty bedrooms and its library and its gym and its kitchen where Margaret cooked actual meals instead of the pasta and frozen vegetables that were all Ethan could manage. He thought about Lily having her own room, having stability, having two adults who loved her instead of one exhausted single dad barely holding things together. I need time to think, he said finally. This is a big decision and it affects Lily. I need to talk to her, make sure she's comfortable with it. Of course, Vera said. Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. And Ethan, whatever you decide, it doesn't change how I feel about you. If you're not ready for this, I'll wait. I'm patient when it matters. That night, Ethan lay awake in the darkness of his studio apartment, Lily sleeping peacefully beside him in the bed they shared because there was nowhere else for her to sleep. He thought about Vera's offer, about the life it represented. Stability, comfort, the kind of security he'd been chasing for 2 years. He also thought about his fears. What if he became dependent on Vera's generosity and then things fell apart? What if moving into her home made him feel like a charity case instead of an equal partner? What if Lily got attached to this new life and then had to lose it the way she'd lost her mother, her old home, everything that used to feel permanent? But another voice in his head, one that sounded suspiciously like Emily, asked different questions. What if it worked? What if choosing hope over fear led somewhere beautiful? What if protecting yourself from potential loss meant missing out on actual joy? He thought about Emily's last coherent words to him, spoken in a morphine haze but clear enough. Don't stop living just because I had to. Promise me you'll choose happiness when you find it again. He'd promised. At the time, he'd thought happiness was impossible, that survival was the best he could hope for. But now here was Vera offering him more than survival, offering partnership, family, a future that included more than just getting through each day. The next morning, he made breakfast for Lily, scrambled eggs and toast, her favorite. When they sat down together, he broached the subject carefully. Remember how you asked if we might move in with Miss Lang someday? Lily's eyes went wide. Are we going to? She's asked us to, but it's a big decision and I need to know how you feel about it. This is your life too. You get a vote. Lily was quiet for a moment, her 6-year-old brain working through complex emotions. Would I have my own room? Yes, a big one with space for all your art supplies and books. Would we still be just us sometimes? Like you and me time? Always, Ethan promised. No matter who else is in our life, you and me are a team. That never changes. Would Ms. Lang be my mom? The question came tentatively, loaded with hope and fear in equal measure. Ethan chose his words carefully. She'd be an important adult in your life who cares about you very much. Your mom will always be your mom. That doesn't change. But you can have more than one person love you. There's room in your heart for your mom's memory, and for Vera, and for anyone else who becomes important to you. Lily nodded slowly, processing. I like Miss Lang. She's nice to me and she teaches me things and she makes you smile more. I think we should say yes. You're sure? Ethan asked. It's okay if you need time to think about it. I'm sure, Lily said with the certainty of childhood. We've been sad for a long time, Daddy. I think it's okay to be happy now. Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought. His 6-year-old daughter had just articulated what he'd been struggling to accept, that grief didn't have to be permanent, that choosing joy wasn't betrayal, that happiness was allowed even after loss. He texted Vera later that morning. Lily and I talked. If the offer still stands, we'd like to say yes. The response came almost immediately. The offer stands. When do you want to move in? Ethan thought about their month-to-month lease, about the landlord who'd been threatening rent increases, about the water damage and the spotty heat and the cramped space that had never been meant for 2 people. Give me 2 weeks to give notice and pack. Is that too soon? Not soon enough, Vera wrote back, but I'll wait. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of packing and logistics and conversations about boundaries and expectations. Vera drew up the legal agreement she'd promised, employment contracts separate from living arrangements, clear protections for both of them if the relationship ended. They discussed house rules, private spaces, how to handle conflicts in front of Lily. They were careful, deliberate, treating this like the complicated blending of lives that it was. On moving day, Ethan stood in his studio apartment for the last time, cardboard boxes stacked by the door, Lily bouncing with excitement beside him. This place had been survival, a space that kept them off the streets but never felt like home. He wasn't sad to leave it. Margaret met them at the brownstone's door with a smile. Welcome home, she said simply, and Ethan felt something in his chest crack open at the word. Home. Not just a place to sleep or a job site, but home. Vera was waiting in the entrance hall, her wheelchair positioned beside the staircase. When Lily ran to her with a hug, Vera caught her carefully, her face soft with emotion. Welcome home, Lily, she said. Want to see your new room? Yes! Lily practically vibrated with excitement. Vera led them upstairs using the stair lift she rarely showed outsiders, clearly self-conscious about even this small admission of limitation. But when they reached the second floor, self-consciousness gave way to something else, pride in what she'd prepared. Lily's new room was beautiful. Large windows let in afternoon light. The walls painted a soft blue-gray that felt calm without being boring. There was a twin bed with a new comforter covered in butterflies, a desk for homework, shelves for books and toys, a corkboard already mounted on the wall for hanging artwork. In the corner stood an easel with fresh paper and a set of professional quality colored pencils. Lily stood in the doorway, speechless for maybe the first time in her life. Do you like it? Vera asked, and Ethan heard actual nervousness in her voice. This brilliant, confident woman suddenly uncertain whether she'd done right by a 6-year-old. It's perfect, Lily whispered. Then louder, it's the most perfect room ever. She ran to the easel, the bed, the window, touching everything with the reverent joy of someone receiving more than they dreamed possible. Vera showed Ethan his room next, down the hall from Lily's, respecting the boundary he'd requested about not immediately sharing a bedroom while his daughter adjusted. It was larger than his entire previous apartment, with an actual closet and an ensuite bathroom and a window seat overlooking the park. Your stuff is in boxes in the corner, Vera said. I didn't want to presume where you'd want things. And if you hate anything about the setup, we can change it. This is your home now. You should make it feel that way. Ethan turned to her, this woman who'd taken his disaster of a life and offered him stability, who'd invited his daughter into her home and given her butterfly-covered bedding, who'd somehow figured out how to love them both without making it feel like charity. Thank you, he said, and the words felt inadequate for everything they were meant to carry. For all of this, for taking a chance on us. You took a chance on me first, Vera reminded him. Showed up to work for someone everyone said was impossible, stayed through red days and board battles and everything else. This is just returning the favor. This is more than returning a favor, Ethan said quietly. This is building a life together. Yes, Vera agreed. It is. Are you scared? Terrified, Ethan admitted, but less scared than I'd be if I'd said no. Good, Vera said, because I'm terrified too. We can be terrified together. They stood in the doorway of what was now Ethan's room, Lily's delighted discoveries audible down the hall, and Ethan felt the last of his resistance crumble. This was happening. They were building something new from the wreckage of their separate disasters, and maybe it would work or maybe it wouldn't, but at least they were brave enough to try. That night, after Lily was settled in her new room, after stories and reassurances, and one last check that yes, this was real, and yes, they got to stay, Ethan found Vera on the terrace off her study. She was positioned by the railing, looking out over the city lights, the evening warm enough that she'd opened the doors to let in air. Thank you for the butterfly bedding, Ethan said, joining her at the railing. She's going to sleep with that picture you gave her clutched to her chest. I wanted her to feel welcome, to know this is her home, not just a place she's allowed to visit. Vera turned her wheelchair slightly to face him. How are you doing? Really? Really? I'm overwhelmed and grateful and still half convinced I'm going to wake up and find out this is a dream. Ethan reached for her hand. But I'm happy. Genuinely happy for the first time in 2 years. Me too, Vera said softly. I forgot what this felt like. Having people to come home to instead of just a house. They sat together in comfortable silence, the city alive around them but feeling distant from this small pocket of peace they'd created. And Ethan thought about beginnings, how they came from endings, how loss made space for new love, how the worst chapters of your life could somehow lead to the best ones if you were brave enough to keep turning pages. I love you, he said, because the moment felt right for saying it out loud, for claiming this truth without qualification. I love you too, Vera replied. Both of you. My accidental family. Accidental families are the best kind, Ethan said. The ones you choose instead of just being born into. Then let's choose this, Vera said. Every day, through the easy parts and the hard ones. Let's choose each other. Deal, Ethan agreed and sealed it with a kiss under the New York City stars. The first month of living together had its adjustments. Lily adapted fastest, treating the brownstone like it had always been hers, filling the quiet spaces with her 6-year-old chaos, art supplies scattered across the library table, her voice echoing through hallways that had been silent for too long, her presence transforming Vera's carefully controlled environment into something that felt lived in instead of just maintained. Ethan struggled more with the transition, fighting the ingrained instinct that this was temporary, that security this good couldn't last. He found himself hesitating to use certain rooms, to claim space, to act like he belonged in a home worth more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Vera noticed, of course. She noticed everything. You're doing it again, she said one evening in late July. They were in her study, working late on the European expansion proposal that had evolved from defensive strategy into actual business development, treating yourself like a guest instead of someone who lives here. I'm not, Ethan started, then stopped because she was right. It's a hard habit to break. I spent 2 years in survival mode, never letting myself get comfortable anywhere because comfort felt dangerous. Like if I relaxed, everything would fall apart. And now? Vera asked, setting down the stylus she used for her modified trackball. Now I'm living in a multi-million-dollar brownstone with a woman I love, and my daughter has her own room with butterfly bedding, and I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake, that I don't actually get to keep this. Ethan's voice was rough with honesty. It feels too good to be real. Vera maneuvered her wheelchair closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. It's real, and it's yours. Not because of luck or charity or some temporary arrangement, because you earned it. You showed up every day when showing up was hard. You stayed when staying was harder. You let yourself love me despite every rational reason not to. This is what you get for being brave enough to try. I don't feel brave, Ethan admitted. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most of the time. That's what bravery looks like, Vera said simply. Holding it together when falling apart would be easier. You've been doing that since Emily died. Give yourself credit for it. They were interrupted by Lily appearing in the doorway, already in her butterfly pajamas, clutching the worn stuffed rabbit that had been Emily's last gift to her. I can't sleep, she announced. My brain won't turn off. Come here, baby girl, Ethan said, opening his arms. Lily climbed into his lap, something she was getting almost too big for, and nestled against his chest. What's your brain thinking about? Everything, Lily said seriously. Like how my room is so big now, and how Ms. Vera taught me to make the butterflies have patterns, and how Katie at school said I was lying when I told her we live in a mansion now, and how I miss mommy sometimes, even though I'm happy here, and is that okay? Ethan felt his throat tighten. He glanced at Vera, who was watching them both with an expression that managed to be gentle and fierce at the same time. That's more than okay, Ethan said, smoothing Lily's hair. You can be happy here and still miss mommy. Both feelings can exist together. Love doesn't run out. There's always room for more. But what if mommy is sad that I'm happy without her? Lily's voice was small, worried. What if she thinks I forgot her? Your mom would never think that, Ethan said firmly. You know what she told me before she died? She made me promise that I'd make sure you were happy, that you'd have a good life, that you'd know how much she loved you. Every time you're happy, you're keeping her alive in the best way possible. You're living the life she wanted for you. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she turned to Vera with the directness of childhood. Do you think my mommy would like you? Vera didn't hesitate, didn't deflect or make it about herself. I think your mommy would be grateful that someone loves you and your dad. I think she'd want to know you're safe and happy and cared for. And I really hope, that she'd trust me to help take care of you both. I think she would, Lily said decidedly. Because you're nice and you're smart and you don't try to be my mom, but you still care about me like moms do. Something shifted in Vera's expression, vulnerability breaking through her usual control. That means everything to me, Lily. Thank you. Lily yawned, her earlier restlessness fading into sleepiness. Ethan carried her back to her room, tucked her in under the butterfly comforter, kissed her forehead the way Emily used to. Love you, Daddy, Lily murmured, already half asleep. Love you too, baby girl. More than the whole world. When he returned to Vera's study, she was still in the same position, but her face was wet with silent tears. Hey, Ethan said softly, kneeling beside her wheelchair. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, and it's overwhelming. Vera wiped at her eyes impatiently. That little girl just gave me permission to love her. Do you understand how rare that is? How much trust that requires? She barely knows me, and she's letting me into her life like I've always been there. She knows what matters, Ethan said, that you care about her, that you make her dad happy, that you give her space to still love her mom while building something new. Kids are better at navigating complex emotions than adults give them credit for. She's extraordinary, Vera said. You've raised an extraordinary human being. I mostly just tried not to break her, Ethan said honestly. But thank you. Vera reached for his hand, her grip stronger than it had been months ago. Therapy continuing to work miracles in increments. I need to tell you something. I've been scared to say it because it feels too big, too fast. But Lily's honesty tonight makes me want to be equally honest. Ethan's heart rate picked up. Okay. I want this to be permanent. Not just living together, not just seeing how it goes, permanent. I want to marry you eventually, when we're both ready. I want to adopt Lily, if that's something you and she would want. I want to build a family that's real and legal and protected, not just an arrangement that could dissolve if things get complicated. Vera's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her nervousness. I know that's a lot. I know we've only been together a few months and there are still things to figure out, but I need you to know that's where my heart is. This isn't temporary for me. Ethan felt the words settle into his chest, heavy with possibility and promise. Marriage, adoption, permanence, everything he'd stopped letting himself hope for after Emily died. I want that too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I want all of it. Not right now. Lily needs more time to adjust, and we need to figure out how to navigate the work relationship if we're married. But eventually, yes, I want to marry you. I want Lily to have a legal parent who isn't going anywhere. I want to build something that lasts. Eventually, Vera repeated, and she was smiling through her tears. I can work with eventually. Good, Ethan said, because I'm not going anywhere either. They kissed then, long and slow, and full of the terrifying hope that came with choosing permanence in a world that had taught them both that nothing lasted forever. When they pulled apart, Vera was still smiling. We should probably get some sleep, she said. We have the board presentation tomorrow, and Collins is going to be looking for any excuse to cause problems. Let him look, Ethan said. We've given him nothing to work with. The board presentation the next day went exactly as planned. Ethan and Vera presented the European expansion progress together, a seamless partnership that showcased both strategic vision and operational execution. Collins tried to raise concerns about timeline and budget, but Ethan demolished each objection with data while Vera provided strategic context that made their decisions unassailable. Patricia, the board chair, was effusive in her praise. This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership we need. Vera, you've built an exceptional team. The expansion initiative is ahead of schedule and under budget. That's rare enough to be remarkable. After the meeting ended, Collins lingered on screen, his expression sour. Vera, a word in private? Ethan moved to leave, but Vera stopped him. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Ethan. He's my director of strategic operations. He should hear this. Collins's jaw tightened. Fine. I want to be direct. There are rumors about your personal relationship with Mr. Cross. If true, that represents a significant conflict of interest that the board should address. There's no conflict, Vera said coolly. Ethan's employment contract is separate from our personal relationship. His salary and responsibilities are determined by his performance, which is exemplary. Our relationship doesn't impact his professional standing or my ability to lead this company. The optics, Collins started. The optics are that I have a competent leadership team that delivers results, Vera interrupted. If you want to raise concerns about conflicts of interest, feel free to bring them to the board formally. But I'll note that you've never raised similar concerns about board members who hire family members or executives who marry within their companies. Interesting that it only becomes an issue when I'm involved. Collins had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm simply looking out for the company's best interests. No, you're looking for ammunition to undermine my leadership because I won't let you push me out. Vera's voice was steel wrapped in silk. It hasn't worked yet, and it won't work now. If you have legitimate concerns about company performance, bring them up. If you're just manufacturing drama, save us both the time. Collins disconnected without another word. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That was brutal, he said. That was necessary, Vera corrected. Collins has been waiting for an opening to attack. Better to address it head-on than let rumors fester. She turned her wheelchair to face him. Does it bother you that our relationship is now board gossip? I don't love it, Ethan admitted, but I also don't care enough about gossip to pretend I'm not in love with you. Let them talk. We're not doing anything wrong. Good, Vera said. Because I'm done hiding things that matter. Life's too short and I've wasted enough time being careful. August brought Vera's most significant breakthrough yet. Her therapist had been working with her on supported walking, steps taken while holding parallel bars or using a walker. Progress had been steady but slow, each session building strength and coordination that had atrophied over 2 years. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything aligned. Ethan was in his office working on partnership negotiations when Margaret appeared, her face flushed with excitement. You need to come to the gym, now. He followed her, heart hammering with undefined anxiety. When he entered the gym, he found Vera positioned at one end of the parallel bars, her therapist at the other end with a walker positioned between them. "I'm going to walk," Vera announced, and her voice carried equal parts determination and terror. "From here to the walker, 10 steps. No touching the bars." "Vera," the therapist started. "I can do this," Vera insisted. "I've been building toward this for months. I need to try." The therapist positioned herself carefully, ready to catch Vera if she fell. "Okay, on your count." Vera gripped the parallel bars, pushed herself upright, then deliberately released her hold. For a moment she stood unsupported, trembling with effort and fear. Then she took a step. One foot forward, weight shifting, the other foot following. It was awkward, uncertain, her entire body fighting for balance she'd lost 2 years ago. But it was walking. Another step. Then another. Ethan counted silently. 4, 5, 6 steps. Vera's face was set with fierce concentration, her breathing controlled, everything she had focused on the simple act of moving forward. 7 steps. 8. Her legs were shaking visibly now, fatigue overwhelming determination. 2 more, her therapist said quietly. "You've got this." 9 steps. Vera's hand shot out, grabbing the walker's frame before her legs could give out. 10 steps. She'd done it. The gym erupted in celebration, Margaret clapping, the therapist cheering, Ethan frozen in place with tears streaming down his face. Vera stood at the walker, her own face wet with tears, her entire body trembling with exhaustion and triumph. "I walked," she said, her voice breaking. 10 steps, but I walked. Ethan crossed the space between them and wrapped his arms around her, holding her carefully while she gripped the walker. She was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that released 2 years of grief and frustration and desperate hope that maybe, impossibly, her body could be something other than broken. "You walked," Ethan confirmed, his voice thick. "You were incredible." "It's not enough," Vera said through her tears. 10 steps and I need a walker, and I'm exhausted, and it's not... "It's everything," Ethan interrupted firmly. 2 years ago, doctors told you'd never walk again. Today you proved them wrong. Let yourself feel that victory without qualifying it. Vera nodded against his shoulder, still crying, still holding the walker like a lifeline. The therapist gave them space, and Ethan just held her while she processed. Held her through the tears and the trembling and the overwhelming emotional release that came with achieving something impossible. When Lily came home from school that afternoon, they told her immediately. Her reaction was pure joy. She launched herself at Vera with a hug fierce enough that Ethan had to steady the wheelchair to keep them both from tipping. "You walked, like really walked. Can you walk to my room? Can you walk to the park? Can you—" "Slow down, baby," Ethan said gently. Ms. Vera walked 10 steps with a walker. That's amazing, but it's not running marathons yet. It's going to take time to build up strength and distance. "But you'll keep getting better, right?" Lily asked Vera, her face anxious. "You'll be able to walk more." "I hope so," Vera said honestly. "I'll keep working at it. But even if this is as good as it gets, 10 steps with a walker, that's still better than I had yesterday. Sometimes progress is slow and small, but it's still progress." Lily considered this with her usual seriousness. "Mrs. Rodriguez says the caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly all at once. It takes time in the cocoon. Maybe you're still in the cocoon part." "That's a good way to think about it," Vera said, smiling. "I'm still in the cocoon, but I'm getting there." That night, after Lily was in bed, Vera and Ethan sat on the terrace under the stars. Vera had graduated from her regular wheelchair to a lighter transport chair for evening mobility, another small victory in a series of incremental changes. "I've been thinking about timing," Vera said, "about when to make things permanent between us." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Okay. I don't want to wait years to marry you. I know we said eventually, but I've spent too much of my life being cautious. I want to choose you legally, officially, in a way that tells the world this is permanent." Vera turned to face him. "Would 6 months from now be too soon? February, maybe? Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Nothing extravagant, just us promising to build a life together." "February," Ethan repeated, his heart hammering. That's 6 months away. Too soon? Vera asked, and he heard vulnerability beneath the question. No, Ethan said. Not too soon. Perfect timing, actually. Gives Lily time to fully adjust, gives us time to figure out legal details, gives me time to save for a ring that's worthy of you. I don't need a fancy ring, Vera said. I need you. That's enough. You're getting a ring anyway, Ethan said firmly. You're getting the whole thing. Proposal, ring, wedding, legal commitment. You deserve all of it. So do you, Vera said softly. You deserve stability and partnership and someone who sees you for everything you are, not just what you can provide. I want to be that for you. You already are, Ethan said, and kissed her under the New York sky. The next morning, Ethan took Lily to breakfast at her favorite diner, just the two of them, the way they used to do every Sunday before their lives changed. They ordered pancakes and hot chocolate, and Ethan waited until Lily was mid-bite before broaching the subject. I need to ask you something important, and I need you to tell me the truth about how you feel. Lily set down her fork, immediately serious. Okay. You know how I told you that Vera and I love each other and we're building a family together? Yeah. Well, when adults love each other and want to stay together forever, sometimes they get married. That's a promise they make in front of other people, a legal thing that says we're family officially. Ethan took a breath. I want to marry Vera, but I need to know if you're okay with that. This is your family too. You get a say. Lily was quiet for a long moment, her 6-year-old brain processing complex emotions. Would Vera be my mom if you get married? She could be, if that's what you wanted. We'd have to do legal stuff called adoption that makes her officially your parent. But Lily, baby, that doesn't erase your first mom. Your mom will always be your mom. Vera would just be another parent who loves you and takes care of you. You can have both. Like how I have Mrs. Rodriguez and my teacher, and they both care about me, but they're different? Lily asked, working through the concept. Exactly like that. Different people, different roles, all of them important. Lily picked up her hot chocolate, took a sip, clearly thinking. I like Vera. She's nice to me and she makes you happy, and she doesn't try to replace Mommy. If you marry her, does that mean we definitely get to keep living in the big house? Yes, Ethan said. It means we're family permanently. No more worrying about things falling apart. Then I think you should marry her, Lily said decisively. But Daddy, can I ask her something first? What do you want to ask? I want to ask if she wants to be my mom. Like, really wants to. Not just because you're marrying her. I want to make sure she actually wants me. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Baby girl, Vera absolutely wants you. She loves you. But I think it's really brave that you want to ask her yourself. We can do that together if you want. Okay, Lily said. Can we ask her tonight? That evening, after dinner, Lily approached Vera with the solemnity of someone conducting important business. Ms. Vera, can I ask you something? Of course, Vera said, setting aside the book she'd been reading. Daddy says you want to marry him and maybe adopt me so you'd be my mom legally. Is that true? Vera didn't deflect or soften the question. Yes, that's true. If you're comfortable with it. But do you actually want to be my mom? Lily pressed. Like really truly want to? Not just because you love Daddy, but because you want me too? Vera's eyes went bright with emotion. Lily, come here for a second. Lily approached cautiously. Vera took her small hands in her own, holding them gently. I want to be your mom more than I've wanted almost anything, Vera said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. Not because I'm marrying your dad, but because you're an extraordinary person, and I love you. I love how curious you are, how kind you are, how you see the world with such wonder. I love your drawings and your questions, and the way you're patient with me when my body doesn't cooperate. I would be honored, absolutely honored, to be your mom if you'll let me. Lily studied Vera's face with the careful assessment of someone who'd learned young that adults sometimes lied to make kids feel better. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she launched herself forward into a hug fierce enough to make Vera's wheelchair shift. Okay, Lily said, her voice muffled against Vera's shoulder. You can be my mom, but my first mom is still my mom too. Always, Vera promised. Always and forever. Nothing changes that. Ethan watched them hold each other, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was his family, cobbled together from loss and survival, built on hope and love and the desperate courage it took to try again after everything fell apart. The months between August and February passed in a blur of wedding planning, legal proceedings, and continued therapy. Vera's walking improved incrementally, 20 steps by September, 35 by October, eventually graduating to walking the length of the brownstone's main hallway with her walker. She'd never be marathon running Vera again, but she was mobile in ways that had seemed impossible a year ago. The adoption paperwork was complex, requiring background checks and home studies and interviews with social workers who wanted to ensure Lily's well-being. Lily handled it with remarkable grace, telling the social worker earnestly that Vera taught her coding and made her dad smile and never tried to replace her first mom, but loved her anyway. The adoption was finalized in December, just before Christmas. They celebrated quietly, just the three of them and Margaret, who'd been family long before any legal documents said so. Vera gave Lily a necklace with a butterfly pendant, and Lily gave Vera a drawing of 3 butterflies holding hands, labeled Mom, Daddy, and me, in careful first-grade handwriting. I have 2 moms now, Lily explained to anyone who'd listen. My first mom is in heaven, but she's still my mom, and my second mom is Vera, who's here with me. I'm very lucky. The wedding happened on a cold February morning in the Brownstones' library, the room where Lily had first drawn butterflies, where Vera had first taught her to code, where their family had begun building itself one careful moment at a time. They'd invited only 15 people: Margaret, Lily, Mrs. Rodriguez, Vera's therapist, a handful of colleagues who'd become genuine friends. No board members, no press, nothing that would turn their commitment into a performance for people who didn't matter. Ethan wore his interview suit, properly tailored now that he could afford alterations. Vera wore deep blue, her chair decorated with flowers Lily had helped Margaret arrange. Lily stood between them as they exchanged vows, wearing a butterfly dress Vera had bought her and clutching the necklace her birth mother had given Ethan years ago, Emily's final gift to the daughter she wouldn't live to see grow up. I promise to show up, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. Every day, in every way that matters. I promise to see you for everything you are, brilliant and difficult and brave and human. I promise to build a life with you that honors where we've been while creating something new. I promise to love you exactly as you are for as long as I live. I promise to let you see me, Vera said, her own voice thick with emotion. The strong parts and the broken parts and everything in between. I promise to trust that you're staying, even when fear tells me nothing lasts. I promise to love Lily as fiercely as I love you, to build a family that feels safe for all of us. I promise to choose hope over fear, to choose life over just surviving. I promise to love you exactly as you are for as long as I live. They exchanged rings, simple bands that Ethan had saved for despite Vera's protests, because some things mattered enough to do properly. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lily cheered loud enough to fill the library's high-ceilinged space. "You may kiss," the officiant said, smiling. Ethan bent to kiss his wife. His wife, that word still strange and wonderful, and felt Lily worm her way between them, demanding to be part of the moment. "Group hug," Lily announced, and they obliged, the 3 of them holding each other in the library while their small gathering of witnesses applauded. The reception was simple. Margaret had prepared an elegant lunch. There was champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Lily, and someone had arranged for a cake decorated with butterflies that made Lily gasp with delight. They ate and laughed and celebrated, and Ethan felt the weight of the past 2 years finally lift from his shoulders. This was what healing looked like, not forgetting loss, but building something new that had room for both grief and joy. That night, after Lily was asleep in her butterfly-covered bed and the last guests had gone home, Ethan and Vera sat on their terrace under the February stars. Vera had walked from her bedroom to the terrace using her walker, 43 steps that had taken 5 minutes and left her exhausted but triumphant. "We did it," she said, settling into her wheelchair for rest. "We actually built this." "We did," Ethan agreed, pulling his chair close to hers. A family that chose each other. That's the best kind. What do you think Emily would say? Vera asked quietly. About all this? Ethan considered the question seriously. I think she'd be grateful you love Lily. I think she'd be proud that I didn't give up after she died. I think she'd want me to be happy, and she'd trust you to help me get there. He looked at Vera, and I think she'd like you. You're both stubborn and brilliant, and you both loved me despite my flaws. You'd have gotten along. I wish I could have known her, Vera said. Not to replace her, just to understand more about where you came from, what shaped you. She shaped me by dying, Ethan said honestly. Taught me about showing up when showing up is hard, about loving people through their worst moments, about survival being something you choose every day. I wouldn't have been able to love you the way you needed without learning those lessons from her. Vera reached for his hand. Then I'm grateful to her too, for loving you, for giving you Lily, for teaching you how to stay when staying is hardest. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights blur together in the cold night air. Tomorrow they'd return to work, navigating the complexity of being married colleagues, managing board dynamics, continuing the European expansion that was exceeding all projections. Tomorrow Lily would go to school and tell her friends about the wedding, would continue being a normal kid with homework and playdates and the ordinary concerns of childhood. Tomorrow, Vera would do her physical therapy, taking more steps toward a mobility that was never guaranteed but always worth pursuing. But tonight, they were just two people who'd survived impossible things and found each other in the wreckage. Two people who'd chosen to build something permanent from temporary circumstances. Two people who'd learned that families weren't always born. Sometimes they were chosen, built piece by piece from courage and hope and the desperate faith that maybe, impossibly, good things could still happen. I love you, Ethan said, because the words never got old even when you said them every day. I love you too, Vera replied. Both of you, my accidental family that became permanent. Not accidental anymore, Ethan corrected. Intentional. We chose this. Best choice I ever made, Vera said, and kissed him under the stars. Inside the brownstone, Lily slept peacefully in her room, her walls covered with butterfly drawings and photos of two moms, one in heaven, one downstairs kissing her father on a terrace. In the morning, she'd wake up to a family that was complete in its own complicated way, to a home that would never be perfect but would always be safe, to a future that included coding lessons and pancake breakfasts, and the ordinary magic of being loved by people who chose to stay. This was where the story had been heading all along, through loss and desperation, through impossible interviews and red days and 20-second victories, through fear and hope and the gradual building of trust. Not toward perfection or easy answers, but toward this. A family sitting under winter stars, choosing each other, choosing life over survival, choosing to believe that broken things could be put back together into something new and beautiful. The brownstone's lights glowed warm against the February cold, and inside its walls, three people who'd all learned what it meant to lose everything were learning what it meant to have everything that mattered. Not wealth or status or able bodies or lives free from complication, but each other, chosen and permanent and home. And that, Ethan thought, as Vera's hand tightened in his, was more than enough. It was everything. The end. If you followed this journey from that desperate November morning to this February night, thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing Ethan's fight to provide for Lily, for watching Vera learn to accept help without feeling diminished, for seeing them build something permanent from impossible circumstances. Their story proves that families come in many forms, that healing isn't linear, and that choosing hope, even when fear seems more rational, is always worth it. Drop a like if this story touched you, and comment with your city so I can see how far their journey has traveled across the world. These three found home in each other. May you find yours too.